is 6:30 in the town of Readfield. Please stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Well, good evening to everyone who is here in person and as well as on our Zoom capabilities tonight. I would remind everyone who is speaking around the table and anyone who comes up to the podium, please speak clearly into the microphone so that everyone can hear you at home. We are loud and clear and make sure that we can all be heard on the Zoom. Yes, and if you come up to the podium, please say your name and your address, where you live here in Readfield. We appreciate that because not everyone knows everyone as well. We are looking to conduct this meeting. Eric has a few presentational type things that we'll be doing, and there will be plenty of opportunities for folks to have an opportunity to speak. I am monitoring our Zoom, and so that includes the chat feature as well. So if you are at home listening on Zoom, you can know that I see your chat questions. We already have one in there, and we will get to that when we start talking about our broadband proposal. Anyone have any questions? All right. Eric, if you'd like to get us started.
Yes, I will start by sharing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Eric, while you're getting this warmed up, do you want to go ahead and can we do some introductions for everyone so everyone knows who we are?
Yeah.
Okay. Sean, would you like to start?
Sorry, I missed your question.
Just let everybody know who you are around the table.
Hi, Sean Keegan, Select Board. Sorry about that.
Carol Dornbos, Select Board.
Ralph Eno, Select Board.
Catherine Mills Woodson, Select Board.
I'm Dennis Price of the Select Board.
Andy Tolman, Budget Committee.
Ed Sims, Budget Committee.
Marty Haddish, Budget Committee.
Rebecca Lambert, Budget Committee.
Eric Dyer, Town Manager.
All right.
And we have the other Budget Committee member on Zoom, Ellen.
Oh, there's Ellen. She's waving at us now.
Hey.
Should come up shortly. There we go. All right. So welcome to the Budget Committee. Dennis had given a brief introduction here, and this is a meeting and a hearing. This is, I guess, the closest thing we have to discussion time. Now that we don't have a public a meeting anymore in the form of town meeting. So this is an opportunity for folks to express their opinions, ask a few questions. But just like town meeting, we do want folks to be respectful of the time limits and the rules that are up on the board on the wall. Generally just looking for discourse. And we're not going to solve everything tonight if there are any issues or disagreements, but we do hope to put out some information and have a good solid discussion. So the next slide is about participation. If we have any issues, we do have some backup mechanisms, but this link here is for the Zoom link that some folks are on. Also, we have call-in availability as well. So we've already done the welcome and introductions. The next step will be project highlights, both for the community broadband internet project and the Fairgrounds Community Park and Conservation Project. We will review budget and meeting goals and present and discuss summary budget information. So we've done the welcome and introductions. Dennis took care of that. Thank you. Budget committee as well. Oh. This thing's awful sensitive. So the budget process summary to date, it's important to know how we got here and how this budget came to be. We've had 16 separate select board and budget committee meetings and presentations to develop and discuss the budget since November. We've had review and comment by members of the public, boards and committees, the Budget Committee and the Select Board. We reviewed budget details for all departments and divisions, and we've reviewed the 5-year plan as well, which is an important part of how we manage our projects and assets.
Just a reminder, if you are listening at home, we'd prefer it if you remain on mute. Thank you.
Okay, the meeting goals, we want to highlight and discuss key points, present the FY-23 municipal budget in summary form, and this is in very summary form because we have a lot of things to discuss. We will hear and answer whenever possible any questions, concerns, and comments related to the municipal budget, and provide information on the upcoming town meeting and secret ballot vote. Just a reminder to folks that we do have absentee ballots available at the town office at any time between now and I think it's the Thursday before the election. So absentee ballots after that Thursday, which is, I won't give a date, I'll just say the Thursday before the election, are on an emergency basis only. So ongoing budget goals include improving communication with the public and incorporating public feedback in the budget. We want to consider the town budget separate from the school and county budgets, although we do often look at those together at times to help us understand where things are headed for the net tax impact. We want to focus on capital improvement projects and utilize long-range planning cycles. We want to use designated and undesignated funds responsibly. And we want to work together toward the public good. And that is one of the bedrock principles that we adhere to. Specifically for the FY-23, budget goals, we want to prioritize investment in recreational assets and public facilities. And those goals come from the boards and committees, but also from the select board at their annual retreats where they set some of the direction for our community. We want to provide reliable public services, both for communication, emergency services, and transportation. And we want to minimize budget impacts to taxpayers. That doesn't mean that there are no impacts. We just want to minimize those wherever possible. So a little bit of background on the community broadband internet project. I'll run through 3 or 4 slides very quickly, and then we will just open it up for comments, questions, and discussion. So the goal of this project is to provide uniform, affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband internet to everyone in town. This has been a town priority for the past 3 to 4 years, starting with some questions and concerns from residents, moving on to select board review and action, the forming of a ad hoc broadband committee, and then the formal broadband committee. I want to thank the select board and the broadband committee for their work in moving this project forward. In November of 2021, voters authorized municipal borrowing, an RFP process, and contract negotiations. So that was that special town meeting warrant we had last November. And we had a very high turnout, a record for the town of Readfield. And it was pretty evident that folks wanted us to pursue this. And so we have brought forward those 3 things and have a proposal to review. Again, thank you to the broadband committee and the select board for helping to move this stuff forward. And for members of the public for pushing to have us look at it. Project scope. The proposed construction of a municipally owned fiber optic network to all homes and businesses. So that universal component is there. Network operation provided by Axiom, which is a service provider, internet service provider, selected as the preferred provider through a competitive bid process and criteria-based review. So we had several folks interested in this project. Some submitted bids or proposals that were not really what we were looking for and didn't meet the review criteria. A few did. We met more extensively with them, and Axiom came out as the preferred provider. However, none of that happens until we finish the June 14th vote, and we can then move on to contract. Speaking of that, construction agreements and franchise agreements are ongoing. Right now, we have both documents in for legal review with the town attorney, and we've been working very closely with Axiom and our partner towns to try to figure out how best to approach this that's fair to the service provider and fair to the town, this truly is something of a public-private partnership. It's not a public utility. It's a public-private partnership to provide municipal broadband service. If approved in June, construction could happen in 15 to 18 months, or construction would start sooner than that. It's a big project with long leads. So this will not be an instant gratification project. We will have to work long and hard to make it happen over the next year, but we're prepared to do that. Potential risks. This is one of the concerns people had, is that we hadn't clearly identified all of the risks, and we cannot identify all of the risks, but we can say that we identified as many as we possibly could. We talked about them with the select board and with the budget committee and with the broadband committee, and we found the risks to be manageable. If in the future we find risks that are not manageable, the select board will have to make a decision on how to proceed with that. But for the time being, we've determined that we have a comfortable level of risk. One of the biggest is take rate. If we don't have enough people subscribe to this service, it could be an issue for the town and for the ISP provider. We estimate a 35% take rate in the first year, but the break-even point is well under that. That's not information that I've been willing to divulge. Maybe Mark will. He's here today, but I see that as confidential and sensitive business information, and it wouldn't necessarily be fair to put that out there. But we know what it is. We've reviewed it, and we feel comfortable that that we'll meet those goals, that the service provider will be able to function healthfully, and the service can continue. Project costs are increasing, and this is the a part where I am concerned. We have seen significant increases in borrowing costs over the past 3 months. We were looking at 2%. We had estimated 2.5, and now we're looking at 4%. So there is an impact there. Worth noting, and also worth noting that construction costs could be increasing as well. We are working to secure contract pricing in July, if possible, to ensure that we have a firm number for a bulk of these contract costs, being the build out and the connection. We have a $200,000 contingency initially set aside, and we have some flexibility here. We're looking at a project that is going to be in the range likely of $4.7 to $4.9 million. Grants are not guaranteed. We will be pursuing grants. We expect to get grants. Towns that are similar to Readfield have gotten millions. If we can get $500,000, I'll be happy. If we get $1 million, I'll be ecstatic. If we get 2, well, it'll be great, but we can't guarantee that. And one of the things that we've tried to do here is put out to work a process so that we can go to a grant agency and say, we have community buy-in. The November town meeting was a really good sign. It was a great sign, 70% voter approval for borrowing pending this vote that we're going to have in June. So that's part of it. If we can show that we have those funds available, it makes our grant making or grant receiving ability that much higher. Cost considerations, the total estimated cost, again, $4.7 to $4.9 million. All of our budget estimates are put on the high end. We're not trying to cut corners on this and just wish or will away costs that we can't control. That's not what's happening. The fiber optic network and equipment capital, that's the lines that run along the roads, and the central computing system that runs all this stuff is projected and scheduled to be paid for through that bond by the town of Readfield as our investment in bringing in competition to the internet service market, and allowing Axiom to provide that service to residents who would choose to subscribe to it. Originally, we were looking at $20 a month for that cost on average for a homeowner. With the increase in borrowing costs, that's looking more like 24. So there is a small change there. And the reason we're looking at this on a monthly basis is because that's how everybody right now pays most utilities, is on a monthly basis. You can compare this perhaps to your Spectrum bill, your consolidated bill. Subscription fees for services based on speeds from 100 megabits symmetrical at $40 a month up to 1 gigabit symmetrical. And right now Spectrum has increased their offering to 200 megabits, but they don't have a lower tier offering. They don't have a low cost offering. So I think that that's one thing that actually makes this fairly competitive, is that we have a lower cost, lower speed option than Spectrum does, which is helpful when people are looking to save money. We have a 250 megabit per month service option that's much better than what's being offered by Spectrum. And that would look pretty competitive, pretty comparable to what people would be getting for their 200 over, I think, roughly 20 service from Spectrum. But there are a lot of other reasons why you would want to go consider this other than the cost. The average total cost will be about $60 a month for 100 megabit service plus optional router at $7 a month. And I guess that should say 64 because I updated the 24, but that should say 64. These figures are firm for at least 2 years. And that's a guarantee that I've discussed with the owner of Axiom. And we're hoping we can keep it longer. And I expect we probably will, but it all depends on how things look over the next 2 years. The other considerations that we want to talk about are 100% coverage townwide up to 1 gigabit of service. These are some of the check boxes and some of the criteria that we needed and that the select board established initially. Advertised speeds are guaranteed. They're not up to speeds. Oftentimes you do a speed test with other service providers. You don't get what you are paying for. This is a guaranteed service for making sure we have the backhaul and bandwidth necessary to provide guaranteed levels of service. And that's with the bandwidth and also with the equipment that's on hand to utilize that. We're working with a Maine-based customer support and a Maine-based company. This is a local company in the state of Maine, and service will be local, customer service and tech service. So some value there. We also want to point out there is low income assistance available, and this is for all services. If we've done anything by promoting this project and starting this discussion, I want people to know that if you are lower income, you are eligible for, sorry about that, those Mack trucks. You're eligible for a $30 a month reduction in your internet bill, whether you're with Spectrum or Axiom or Consolidated or anybody else. So people should be aware of that. And the last thing I want to point out is this is a community-owned network with local control of services through that franchise agreement that we negotiate and renegotiate, and the pricing. And we are investing in an asset with real value. This will cost several $1 million to put in, but it will be a multi-million-dollar asset for the life of the project. And that's something that is often overlooked. We're putting money in the bank with that. But that's my summary of how we got here, what the project looks like, what the scope is, some of the risks. And there's more to it, and we can certainly delve into that. But I want to first welcome Mark Willett, owner of Axiom, and Brian Lippold, who is our broadband consultant and has been for the past probably 3 years anyway, as we've worked through this process. They're both in the audience here and available to answer questions in their relative areas of expertise. We have time for several questions and comments. If this goes on for a long time, we may need to move on and go to the rest of the public hearing, but we will have time later on for more public comment and questions. So I'll ask folks to visit readfieldmaine.org if they have a need for more information that's not available here tonight. So with that, I will stop my screen sharing and we can go to, I'll let Dennis run the communication piece.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I just want to start off and mention the first chatted question, perhaps would be a good way of going about that. In the chat, there is a question from Philippa. I hope I've said that wrong. And the question is this: regarding the broadband proposal, do tax rates go down if we obtain the projected grants? That's question one. If you sign up for broadband in 2022, there is no installation fee. Is there a financial obligation on the part of a subscriber if they want to cancel? So I would take that in the first part. Do tax rates go down if we obtain the projected grants? And I would throw that to Aaron.
Sure. Short answer is yes. If we borrow the money and we don't need it, it can be returned and we don't have to pay the principal on it. So it would reduce taxes if we got grants, and we hope we do.
And finally, the second part is there a financial obligation on the part of a subscriber if they want to cancel?
I'll ask Mark to answer that one because we've been talking about it, but I'd like to have him have a chance to speak.
Thank you, Mark. If you don't mind just letting us know who you are there at the podium.
I'm Mark Willett with the company of Axiom.
Yes, sir.
No.
Good. Simple enough. Thank you, Mark. There we go. Thank you, Philippa. I hope that answers your question. In a word, brevity is the soul of wit. Thank you, Mark.
We had another question that came in this week that was asked to be read at the town hearing. Dan, you had that from, it was on the email. Can you read and answer that for us? Thank you.
Yeah, go right up there. Yes, it's going to be a little bit of an up and down. There we go.
Dan Wells. I live at Main Street in Readfield. I'm also the chair of the broadband committee. So we had a question from Bob Bork.
Bob Bork. Yep.
Bork. There we go. He said, when the fiber network is fully installed and operational, a monthly user fees expected to adequately cover maintenance and repair costs. Yes, short answer. And his second question was, if it's fully installed and somebody builds a house or a subdivision, who will pay for connecting the house to the network? Once the initial capital cost is made by the town, if you add a house, just like a road, power, phone, whatever, you would have to pay to have that expanded.
Like any other utility.
Like any other utility, correct?
Great.
Can I follow up on that? So if I bought a piece of land on Main Street that has services already, then who is going to cover the cost for the drop from the road to the house?
That would be. So you're saying there's a building on it already?
No.
No building.
So I'm putting a new building, but I'm on a road that already has services.
You would have to pay for that, just like CMP, just like water, just like sewer, just like any other utility.
Okay. Thank you.
That was my understanding.
Correct.
Thank you. There are no other, unless there are folks online from Zoom who would like to raise your hand, let us know, or at least listen to your question. I see that iPad 2 is there.
Yeah, how you doing? This is Greg Lineback.
Yep.
Sorry I'm not there. I got COVID, but I appear to be surviving. Yeah, I was just looking at the Department of Commerce site, and there's billions of dollars that the federal government put in the infrastructure bill regarding broadband. So I assume that some of these grants folks are talking about have been, the initial research has been done on these, and there's a game plan to access those funds for underserved homes and businesses.
Thank you, Greg. Would you like to speak to that?
So yeah, short answer is yes, but I'll let Mark speak. He's going to be our partner in pursuing these grants and has some wonderful experience in that area.
So yes, we're well aware of all the federal and state grants that are available. We've researched them, and right now I have a little over $20 million of projects in under contract using the model we're using in Readfield. And of those 20 to $21 million in projects, we have almost $14 million in grants that we set against those $20 million projects. I've been involved intimately in all of those grants, both at the federal level at NTIA. We just received 3 projects from NTIA. USDA Reconnect, another program that we participated in and got 3 projects through there. Through that process at the federal level. We also participated in CARES Act funding, got a $1.65 million project through CARES Act, which is sort of no longer there, but it was there for a while. And we just received 3 grants through the last round of state funding for 3 projects in Maine. So we're doing pretty good. And I expect that we will work hard for Readfield in as a public-private partnership to try to bring as much money as we can here from it will likely be state funds, which are really federal funds. And there's about $150 million. And the rumor is the next round is going to be between $30 and $40 million coming out sometime in September. That's the rumor. We'll see.
Yeah. One point too, I do want to say that Mark has been very successful a lot of the communities that he is working with are very much underserved. Readfield is in a different situation. We have fairly good coverage, if not good service over most of the town. So that is a complicating factor, something that we're aware of. And one reason why we're looking at smaller, likely grant revenues coming in doesn't mean we wouldn't be eligible for, as I said, 500,000, if not more. But we're being conservative in how we estimate and how we talk about this.
In the most recent round, good point. Thank you, Eric. In the most recent round, we received $400,000 for a town that it has better spectrum coverage than you have now, meaning more homes were covered by spectrum in that town. And we received about 400,000, and they're smaller, about 900 homes total in that town. So, you know, we think there's a good effort here, but of course, this next round is going to be greatly overprescribed.
Yeah.
It's going to be extremely competitive, although you do get extra points for being municipally owned. And you will also get points because of the low cost of the 100 over 100. You get extra points for that. So I expect you to be really competitive, relatively speaking, in comparison to whatever else is coming. But the rules aren't all fully formed, and there could be some changes, and so anyway.
Just another question that came in via the chat on the Zoom, and it's from Elaine Katz. What is the turnaround time for tech support, and is it 24/7?
24/7 tech support is not available at the moment. We do monitor all calls, and if there's an emergency, we will answer 24/7. We do that, but we do not have formal tech support. So if you have a problem in the middle of the night, you will be leaving a message, and we will be determining whether or not that's an emergency that needs to be addressed in the evening. We are expanding formal tech support till 11 o'clock at night, where most of our calls come, and where we are answering those calls, but we're doing it not with a live person answering. We monitor them. So we will be formally expanding that till 11. It's possible that we'll go 24/7, but I haven't made a final determination on that. So hopefully we will be able to respond to you as quickly as we can get it to you.
Absolutely. Ralph?
Mark, do we know if Spectrum is 24/7 at this point?
I don't know. I assume so. I don't know, actually, really. I mean, I've never called Spectrum in the middle of the night. Maybe, yeah. I don't know.
Just curious
You don't?
service level would be comparable, and I suspect they're not, but I can't say empirically that.
Yeah,
Well, to have apples to apples, I'm not sure 24/7 is a make or break issue.
we've been asked by several communities what to expect, and I promised every community that we're working with that we are absolutely going to go till 11 o'clock with live help, because I think that in the evening, I think that's very legitimate, and we start at 8, and we'll probably start earlier than that when we expand our hours once these projects start to come online. I will evaluate in the middle of the night calls as we move forward. And if we determine that there's enough of them to warrant a person 24/7, we would add that service. But that's not been the case up till now. Most people understand in the middle of the night, it's difficult to get service and something going on. And a lot of times, well, all right. See, my first answer was brevity. No. Now you've got me talking, so I apologize. I'll leave it at that.
That's all.
I have a couple items here from online, and then we'll get to you, Brent. The first one is, many of us use Spectrum for internet, phone, and television. What does Axiom have to suggest for phone and television?
We do offer phone service, and we hope you won't take it from us, because you can do it for free on fiber or for much less cost than what you're currently paying at Spectrum. Maybe $10 a month for a formal service like Magic Jack or something like that. So you're welcome. We're happy to take your money if you'd like us to provide phone service, and you can port your number over and it's unlimited local and continental US, $24.99, I think it is right now, I think. So you have that offering. We do not offer a formal cable. You're moving from a cable system and cable TV to an online system using internet, where you would be paying for subscription services that would replace your cable television. So we do not offer that formally from Axiom. That comes from places like Netflix, Nat Geo TV, Disney Plus, all of the different Paramount. And in those services, you can now get local television service, and you can also get my favorite, NESN or New England Sports Network, so that you can get all of the ball games.
Excellent. I have one.
Eric, you like that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
I'm
Eric.
sorry, I just wanted to, before we move on to more chat questions, Sean Roderick had his hand up before many of those
I was
questions
just
came
gonna,
in.
yeah,
Yep.
gonna get to Sean right now. Sean, if you want to unmute and
Yep.
hit us with your.
Yep. Sorry, I couldn't be there. My son has a baseball game and I don't get to a lot of work, but my apologies. So
Why we
my
do
question
Zoom.
is, how many customers does Axiom currently have? How many employees do you currently have for the caseload that you have? And what would the response time be? Where are your workers located? What's the response time if there's an outage? I mean, where are the employees coming from? How many do you have per how many customers do you have? And with the load of Readfield, how many employees would you have to how many customers you have?
Yeah, I expect by the time this project gets built that we'll have approximately 15 employees. Right now, we just added 2 more employees, and we expect to continue to add as these projects come online. They come online in sort of staggered way, so we'll keep adding employees as we go along. Our commitment to the town is to hire a local person and to train them to do fiber service for us as a second step before we have to roll a truck. And our trucks are based in Machias. So you can figure out what the hour, to get here, it's about 3 hours, something like that, from Machias with a truck. I don't expect that to be very often. Fiber is extremely reliable, and the local service technician that we plan on hiring would expect it to help us in, well, let me back up and say, the first thing you do when you have a problem is you call us. We answer the phone, and 98% of the calls are typically within the household itself in your own equipment that we help you walk through. The service is actually working, and we just have you reboot and do a few things and make sure it's working properly, and you're good to go. 98% of the calls. The next 1%, 1.5%, okay, there's a problem, we don't know what's going on. We would send the local technician same day to come and see you, look at it, troubleshoot. That solves, again, the extra. And then in a very rare case where we have a fiber issue at the central office, likely, for whatever reason, something's not working properly, we would roll a truck from Machias. That typically would happen next day. I think we under contract for 24-hour service in a catastrophic, was something that requires a truck roll from Machias. We would try to get there same day, but it depends.
I'm gonna ask Mark. You can have a seat. Brett, I'm gonna.
Can
Sean,
I
did
ask
you
one
have
more
more?
follow-up?
Yeah, make it quick because we got a lot.
All
Go
right,
right
well,
ahead.
this is an important issue. I mean, we're borrowing a huge
Yes.
amount of money.
Yes,
What after
absolutely.
so I heard in a prior question that if you're not hooking up with the first initial hookup, you're going to have to pay. What is that cost going to be to new residents to the town? Because one of the selling points is all this is going to draw, I've seen it in a lot of the flyers from the town, this is going to draw new residents to the town of Readfield. Well, what's that cost going to be to a resident to hook up? Or if they don't have cable, they don't have fiber optics, what's that cost going to be to the resident of the town of Readfield if you move or build a new home?
Yeah, I get the question. Yep.
Thank you, Sean.
It's typically, it's done on a case-by-case basis by the foot from the nearest telephone pole. So typically, pardon me? Oh, he's talking baseball.
Oh,
or
yeah.
softball.
Go ahead.
Right,
Yeah,
all
he's
right.
muted.
So,
It's
right. So that's typically how we do it. So it's hard to sort of estimate what it costs. The equipment at the home, round numbers are around, before labor, is around $175. So it gives you a sense of it's going to be, not outrageously expensive, but it will cost the homeowner something to get connected to the fiber. Now,
So what is
that
your-
said,
What's your cost per foot then? I mean, you got to be able to say what your
dollar,
cost. I mean,
typically $1 per foot, typically.
okay. All right. So it's about the going rate on the market then. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. We're going to get to some other questions here. And Mark, you can have a seat because this question is for the Broadband Committee. This is coming from Rob Peel. It says, what gives the Broadband Committee members confidence that this will be state-of-the-art and competitive 10, 15, or even 20 years out? That's the first question. The second question is, why not do a 10, 12, or 15-year bond so we have less chance of paying for something after it might be out of date? So the first question, what gives broadband members, committee members confidence that this will be state-of-the-art and competitive in 10, 15, or 20 years? Are there any members of the, go right ahead. Step on up and remind us who you are.
Dan, the chair of the broadband committee. So this discussion has occurred with Axiom. So the network is being built for the future. So it's being built large enough so that we can expand. So when the bandwidth gets larger and larger, we can handle it. So that, I don't know if that answers that question totally.
Yeah, I think so. Perhaps Rob will do a follow-up if he needs it. But the second question is, why not do a 10, 12, or 15-year bond so we have less chance of paying for something after it might be out of date? It sounds like your answer sort of crosses over to both of those.
It does, but the shorter period of bond, the higher the payments, the higher the tax bill. So
Right.
we're trying to kind of equalize this out. You're going to borrow the money for 20 years, pay it back at a lower impact to the tax bill.
Gotcha. Mr. West, I'm not ignoring you. You want to come on up now and give a shot? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your patience. And thanks, everyone. Just a reminder, there's a lot of folks here, so we're just trying to make sure we get to everyone. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And
Yes,
Eric, I appreciate you putting up some of my concerns from a previous meeting. I had a couple of questions. We talked about in early the broadband committee about equity and affordability. I didn't know if maybe Catherine or someone else could have defined what affordability meant. Like when that's a goal, how is that defined?
In what sense?
Well, I mean, is it just subscriber affordability or is it total cost affordability? That was one of the goals in the broadband committee, is to provide affordable service.
Right. So with the estimated bond payment, evidently with inflation now being $24 a month on an average home of $250,000. If your total bill is $64, $24 is a little more than a third of that cost. And that's a fixed cost for 20 years. There's no other service available to our town that can guarantee you a fixed cost for a third of your bill for 20 years. So we know what that will be. That rate would not go up. So even if we renegotiate in the future with Axiom, which are set at specific points in the contract, Eric, is that correct? It would just be the service end that would be going up, not the base rate. So that makes it very affordable for folks. And the total cost, as Eric presented earlier, comes in at approximately the same as what Spectrum is now, but for a greatly different and better service. So that's how we determined affordability. Dan, would that be about right? Okay.
And the reason I ask that is Axiom in other towns has allowed the town to put on a subscriber fee on top of their fee to pay back the bond. Was that discussed so that the subscribers, the people who would use this, bear more of the burden than just the taxpayers?
Eric, would that be a question best for you?
Sure, yeah. So we did consider that. For a couple reasons, we opted to steer away from that because we did want to make this available to everybody, and it's a good way to provide a a conduit for access by having everybody chip in. The other part of that, I'm sorry, the other part, you had a second part maybe?
It was just, why did the broadband committee and select board choose to bond completely,
Yes.
then offset some of the costs with
Sure,
subscriber fees?
that's right. Yeah, so a major reason for that is the type of bonding that we're pursuing. We are pursuing tax exempt bonding, and in order to do that, we need to have a model that looks more like what people do, say, for example, with the Cross Insurance Center or the one in Portland there, where the town is responsible for the capital asset, and then the service side of it is completely separate. So that was, those were a couple of reasons. The other major reason is that we don't want to make any money on this. We want to do this so that the subscribers can have the lowest possible monthly fee. And that helps them, and it helps with uptake, which in turn can help with stability and security for the network, so that we're less likely to have a situation where the network might not be viable.
Yeah, so I started thinking about that, and you still won't tell us how many subscribers we have to have, and you say break even, which break even doesn't make sense if we're not making any money from the deal. So that's break even for Axiom?
For Axiom, yes.
Okay.
The town's break even is we don't have any profit. So we were already at break even. We're not making any money off of this.
And these subscriptions would come after construction?
During and after, yes.
Okay. And for a 35% success rate, I guess you're looking for, that's roughly 465 subscribers.
Yep.
So we're looking at $11,600 or $300 per subscriber for this service.
No. I mean, the subscribers aren't paying the bond cost.
No, but if our goal
They're
is
paying a portion-
35%.
Yeah, they're paying a
of
portion of it, not the whole thing.
the subscribers,
Yeah.
which is 465, our goal is to hook up 465 households. And that for $5 million with debt service works out to be $11,300.
No, our goal is 100%.
Okay.
The break even is 35.
We're hoping that it will be 35%. And that's based on Mark, or maybe, remind me of your name. Brian, sorry, brain fade, can answer this, but in multiple projects around the country and throughout the Northeast, New Hampshire and Vermont, 35 to 40% has been a typical take rate in a new municipal project.
Okay,
So there's
great.
no reason that we shouldn't expect that that would be the same here.
In those introductory offers of hooking up to the house sunset after the first year?
Currently, although depending on how things go with the cost, I'd like to be able to extend those to 18 months or longer. But that's something we have to finish negotiating, but it's guaranteed for at least the first year.
Okay, I had a couple questions for you, Brian, actually, because I found your report to be very helpful. In last year's meeting minutes, and I understand the grant landscape has changed considerably, but you wrote, or you were recorded saying that under current models, which is maybe the old model, Readfield doesn't score high for grants. Is that still your opinion?
So
Wait, no, we have to go to the mic.
Yeah, sorry,
So we'll
Brian.
have to share.
Sorry, Brian. It's just the folks at home will appreciate it very much. Say your name, where you're here.
Brian Lippold with Casco Bay Advisors, and we're the broadband consultant for the town of Readfield. So if I remember correctly, that was at least a year ago when we drafted that.
It was May 21st or something, 2021, March 17th, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
When you
all right.
had meetings.
So there has been, I believe, 2 grant rounds since that time. And at the state level, recently, whenever they issue a grant opportunity, the rules change from what it was the previous grant round. So we don't know what the rules are going to be for the next grant round. But when we wrote that, you're correct. Readfield would not have scored well because of the way that they defined unserved and underserved within the community. The most recent grant round would have allowed granting for the entire community, which is markedly different than what we wrote in the report at the time. But we don't know what the rules are going to be for this next grant round yet. So we're, I think, optimistic that it's going to be better than what we saw over a year ago. But, you know, we just don't know at this point.
And that still your gut reaction for, in the report you said, or in the minutes you said Readfield was very well served and that would make this project more difficult. Is that?
By the at the time, the state was defining served as anything greater than 50 megabit down and 10 megabit up. I believe that's the definition at that time. With the last grant round, they considered also those that are underserved, which has a different definition. And underserved was defined as anyone less than 100 over 20, which all of a sudden allowed those areas that are served by cable TV infrastructure to be included in the grant application. But again, this next round, we just don't know yet what the criteria is going to be. But the general trend is that they're looking to get everyone to have service of a minimum 100 megabits symmetrical, which makes anything that isn't already fiber eligible for grants. But
And just because this is me, when we talk about up and down, uploading, downloading, when you say symmetrical, it's 100 to upload and 100 to download.
That's correct.
So over top of each other, just in case
That's correct.
you get a little lost in the technical jargon.
And I believe, and Mark can speak to this, the service that they're proposing isn't an advertised 100 over 100. It's a guaranteed 100 over 100, which very few service providers will make that guarantee.
Brian, you also just suggested
Can you
that-
just stand up to the mic,
Yeah, no,
please?
sure.
Thank you.
The only, just because you're our hired gun, so I feel like maybe you can give us the straightest answers. That you suggested communities can compete with cable, but it's expensive to do, particularly when cable is already built out. Do you, and the other in line with that, you said the 3.8 to 4.8 million to build out your own fiber network is heavily dependent on current markets for materials and construction. You know, we just saw the ball field estimates go up by 700,000. Do you think this will increase in that same scale?
I'm going to let Mark answer that because I don't want to speak for Axiom, but they're the ones that have put the price on the table, and it's not clear to me how long that price is good for or what have you.
If those were-
Recognizing that a contract hasn't been signed yet.
Right, and if that was notes and information from a year ago in March, we hadn't put out the RFP yet at that time, and we were still making estimates. And so it's really not relevant now that we
Well, it's
have,
only gotten more expensive, right?
Yes.
yes, but there's not a range now. And
Right.
so that's what you were concerned with there was this huge range, and now we have a fixed price.
So I was worried about the information we're getting now to what the actual cost will be in a year or two.
Right, it's fixed. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes, but it's contingent.
Mark, come up to the microphone, please. Everybody's gonna use the
Thank you,
microphone,
Mark.
please.
You get your steps in. Don't worry. Get your steps.
Mark from Axiom.
Yes. thank you.
Yes, it is going to be a fixed price in the contract. And I right now have a guarantee from our contractors for that fixed price for a certain number of days. So if we do not move forward relatively quickly. And the way we alleviate any price increases is to purchase the equipment up front, all of it, all at once, so that we know what that fixed price is immediately when we purchase it, and that's that. So the people that we work with also in doing labor and such feel like they're comfortable with the numbers. I confirmed that again today, and we feel very good that we're going to be, that we don't see significant price increases. There is a contingency built into our budget that would kick in if there were some unforeseen circumstances that happen. We don't foresee that here, but we always build in on large construction projects for anything. You always build in a contingency, and we've done that here.
And so we're operating within this window of days that you have.
Correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
so
Could you be more specific in terms of the number of days? How big is the window, since we're going to vote June 14th? How much time, assuming a positive outcome, how much time do we have to pull the trigger and stay in that window?
July 30th is what I'm being
Thank you.
told.
I only have one last question. Dan.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
When I was talking to you, Eric, you mentioned Spectrum didn't put in a bid, but I'm starting to think, why would Spectrum bid to build a redundant network for the town? There was mention in more recent minutes that Spectrum will connect all the unconnected houses for $167,000. And there was talks at the broadband committee of if people had issues with speed, they could increase the nodes on each of these end lines to bring people up to a similar speed. So there was equity across the town. Why aren't voters being given that option to vote against the Axiom proposal?
Fair question. And so just to correct you, I did not say that there was not a proposal from Spectrum. I said it wasn't responsive. We had asked for a very specific proposal for a partnership, a municipal network. They did not propose a municipal network. They proposed a private network that we would pay for. And that doesn't meet several of the criteria that were established because it doesn't provide gigabit service equally. It doesn't provide service to everybody in town. And it wasn't municipally owned, which would enable us to have more leverage and more bargaining power, which we're leveraging against Mark currently. We're trying to be good partners with him, but we're also pushing to make sure that we get what we need for consumer protections that you might not get elsewhere. So part of the reason for that is that it just wasn't a very good proposal, and it didn't meet the criteria we had established early on for the project, and that's why.
The only difference I hear in what they were offering and what you said is the town ownership. Is that correct?
No, they were looking to just plug a few holes. The analogy might be that you have an old truck with 250,000 miles on it, and you put new tires on it. You get new tires, but your truck's still pretty old and tired. And that is essentially what we were being proposed. And Spectrum said, well, and you buy the tires, by the way. So it would help with the folks that have no service, but it really wouldn't help anybody else. And that was one of the criteria, one of several that they didn't meet.
And that was obviously justifiable for an 80% increase in our annual budget,
No, there's not an 80% increase in the annual budget.
not between all the increases.
No, we have debt service, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. We did have, it's a $5 million bond. It looks like a tower when you compare the expense side to other expenses. But you also have to look at the revenue side. We have a $5 million revenue bond coming in. Those offset what we have, and what we're obligated for is then the $300,000+ in debt service for this. That's what's being paid for out of the tax base. That is what results in that average of $24 per month for the average homeowner.
When you say revenue bond, that's money you're borrowing against that taxpayers have to pay back.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But it's not an 80% increase.
Well, no, I just meant
yeah.
the total town budget. Is
Yeah,
what
sure.
it said in the,
Yep.
is an 80%. Thank you.
Brent, I appreciate it. Unless you have anything else, we're going to go to Sean. Sean, are you there? You have your,
We're going to finish in 5 minutes.
So I just want to be clear in my understanding, this proposal with Axiom is for 2 years. but the town is on the hook for 20 years. Am I correct when I make that statement?
Hang on one second. We'll give you an answer.
No,
No.
Well, the
Hang on
information
one
that's
second.
put out. Sorry,
Hang on one second. Go ahead, Eric.
I want to know how that's out.
Sorry, Sean, we got a little bit of lag here.
Yeah.
I apologize if I talk over you. The contract that we're negotiating right now is a 10-year contract, and it's a franchise agreement. The town will own this network forever, whether Axiom provides the service or whether Consolidated comes in and does it for us if Axiom doesn't do a good job. The nice thing about the franchise is we have some control over that. The pricing is guaranteed for 2 years. We have our first review of that franchise agreement in year 2. I believe then we have one in year 4 and then another one in year 7. So it's a 10-year agreement, but we do have clauses, again, that allow us, if Axiom doesn't perform, if we have issues, we have the standard mediation and arbitration provisions, but we can change service providers. Again, the idea isn't for the town to provide internet service directly. We are providing the highway, the backbone, the infrastructure for a third-party partner to do that for us. And we have a franchise agreement that holds them accountable to do that. So I guess the short answer would be that it's a much longer term, but yeah.
But the pricing is only for 2 years. So it's being sold as an average home in the town of Readfield is going to pay $250 more in taxes for 20 years. Then your internet is going to be cheaper. But that's only guaranteed for 2 years. And I would argue it's necessarily not going to be cheaper in some cases, but we can argue about that all day. But the pricing is only guaranteed for 2 years, the current price structure and the information that's put out.
That's exactly right. Mark actually, I think, wanted to do longer, and I was uncomfortable with that because I was going to try to squeeze him for more of a reduction if we got to a high take rate in 2 years. I shouldn't have said that publicly, Mark, but no, I mean, I think, again, this is a franchise agreement. We can negotiate. We can try to push it up. We can try to push it down. We don't disagree that this will cost some people in town more. We're looking at the average because that's something that people can understand, a $260,000 home or $265 property. So you're absolutely right. It is going to cost some people more. The folks that have higher value properties will likely end up paying more than they're paying right now for Spectrum. But as you know, with taxes, that's the way it works for roads, for schools, for any municipal expenditure like that. So,
Sean, I have a question in-house, unless you have a follow-up. I want to just make sure I get to everybody. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yep, thanks.
Yep.
Hi, my name's Bruce Burgoyne, and I live on the Fog Road in Readfield. Actually, I don't have a question. I have a couple comments on the discussion thus far and just want to make those comments.
Absolutely.
First of all, I did write an op-ed piece in the Kennebec Journal on the 25th of May, and that sort of illustrates my feelings about this project, which are extremely positive, by the way. So I would urge you to go ahead and look online and read that. And there have been other op-ed pieces too. Read it all. I think it's important to making a good decision. I also think we're not looking at what we should be comparing. You know, this is not an apples and oranges kind of thing between Spectrum and fiber. It's really a small old cherry versus a watermelon. Fiber is a completely different beast. It will deliver greater opportunity to people in Readfield for very many years. It is the leapfrog technology. I've heard people talk about satellite technology, and Mr. Musk can put all the ones he wants up there, but I'm not thinking that's going to work for us. However, fiber is something that we can put, an asset that we can build that will last for many, many, many years. Finally, I do want to comment on some of the discussion around Spectrum. My contract with Spectrum, because that's the service I have because we're forced into that situation, is 0 days. They can raise that price tomorrow because it's no contract service pretty much. Some of us may have legacy contracts. They pretty much are are not doing that anymore. It's sort of like, you know, come as you are and so forth. So I don't think we aren't going to see real large increases from Spectrum down the road. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, I think the 200 speed that they're offering now after June will probably not be as reliable as you think it's going to be. That's, you know, it's a company that has, I don't think well of them, obviously, but I think they have a monopoly. They and one other company in this country. And we have a chance to control our own future, and I think it makes sense to do so. So thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. Marty?
Yeah, thank you. This is Marty Panish. I'm a member of the Budget Committee, and I wanted to make a comment as a member of the Budget Committee. And then if it's the appropriate time, I'd like to make some comments and ask some questions as an individual homeowner and prospective customer. From the Budget Committee perspective, we grilled Eric really hard on contract issues, insurance issues, guarantees, you know, all of the fine print in legal contracts. And I'm satisfied that Eric understood every one of those issues. Not all of them were resolved at that point, but at least he understood it. And that gave me, say, like a 75% confidence level in the project, strictly from a Readfield finance perspective. I offered Eric, you know, after the Budget Committee had wrapped up its work, that he can call on me as someone who's done a lot of contract work, if he has any, if I could be helpful. If he did, my confidence level would go from 75% to 75.01%. Because there is a lot of unknown. Can I move on to talk as an individual? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Spectrum has been providing service to my household for a number of years, many years, since we moved to Readfield. And for almost a year now, we've been paying $49.99 for 200 MPVs. You know, Eric likes to tease us that my wife Elaine is a really good negotiator. But what she negotiated was a promotional discount on top of that, a $10 per month promotional discount. But we didn't really get an unusual deal. They're advertising locally and nationally. This is the ad that was in the local advertiser. Spectrum Internet, $49.99 for 200 megabits, guaranteed for 12 months. Now, we've been getting that for almost a year now. It's not an unusual, you know, deal that we got because they like us. So when I look at it, if I want to maintain, there is no 200 megabit option. It's either $39.99 for 100, which we found to be inadequate, to 250 for $69.99, plus the tax increase on top of that. So my question is, as an individual taxpayer, what advantage do I get from going to the Readfield fiber? We're getting great service. We don't have any problems. There are 3 of us who work from home. And, we did have one problem with wiring in our house. They were here. They got to us the following morning and fixed it, in an hour and a half. So why should I go up to $69.99 plus the tax increase, given what I have?
Thank you.
Just one point, Marty, it's actually $49.99 plus the tax increase.
Well, I thought the 250 megabits was 49? Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay, Marty, but it's still a fair question. And I guess Mark will answer it, or?
Go ahead. Mark. I was just letting you know I have you in the queue. You can come on up.
Mark from Axiom. As stated earlier, it's really not apples to apples in a comparison because the fiber service is extremely more reliable than the cable system that you have now. So I would put up my 100 over 100 for $39.99. I'd actually put up my 25 over 25 guaranteed 24/7 against any Spectrum service. I have at my house in Scarborough where I live, where I don't have any other option, I take Spectrum only internet, and I'm 450 over something 30. And I often have interruptions and difficulties with my Spectrum service. So I would just say from any homeowner, you certainly have you certainly can stay with Spectrum. Nobody's forcing anybody to take any other service. But I would just say from a technology standpoint, I think you would find a much better user experience on the fiber for at the same price or lower than you're experiencing now. And I think with the 3 users that you have, you would do very fine with 100 over 100, even if you look like a mega user. So if you are, then I think you do well there. But I would just suggest that you should give it a try and see what you think. And we're not under any contracts at Axiom, so you could try us out and see. And if you don't like it, you could switch yourself back. But pretty confident that you'll be able. This is the way this is where the world is going. We're going to one pipe to every home, and all of your telecommunications services are going over that one pipe. So more and more and more. And by the way, there was a question about the technology sort of longevity. And I just would say there's fiber now that's been there 20, 25 years that is operational today at full capacity from 25 years ago. So this is not going to go away very easily or be surpassed. It also suggests that we are going to be putting in several ports that can upgrade you to 10,000 megs over 10,000 megs to every home in the future. So the idea that even a gig over a gig, when you use all that up, when, I don't know, 8K, blah, 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 when you try to teleport yourself to Mars or whatever, we'll be able to handle that in the network into the future. So I feel like we're giving you not just a today solution, but a 20, 30-year solution that's going to be an asset to the town.
Thank you, Mark. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. And then right after him, thank you very much.
Good evening, Select Board.
Hello.
My name is Nate Rudy. I live on Main Street. I have a Spectrum contract for 400 megabits, I think. And I have 2 people working from home in our household and 2 students learning remotely in our household. And my evening meetings typically start to glitch out with 400 megabits around 8 o'clock or so when everybody flips on their cable to watch TV. It's 400 megabits on cable. Fiber is substantially better technology than that. I serve on the Town Solid Waste and Recycling Committee, and I also serve on the board for the Maine Council of Aging and the Governor's Commission on Volunteerism. And we talk a lot about the importance of outreach and support for older Mainers, including the increased use of telemedicine and teletherapy for mental and emotional health issues. So it's an important issue for everyone in our community to be able to have affordable access to high-speed internet, even if the citizens have to pay the full cost through the bond for this project, which it sounds like we might not. Fiber is still the cheapest infrastructure investment with the highest return on investment to citizens in Readfield. It's far cheaper than roads and will help attract and retain the type of businesses that you might want to attract to the town, which helps residential taxpayers and helps pay for the road repairs and other things that we might need. But it's just such a low cost to entry to expand the local economy and to provide a better experience for residents here. So I support the idea of expanding access to high-speed internet for residents here. I took a look at the comprehensive plan, and I note that there are already far more than a handful of small businesses here in Readfield who I think would benefit from the fiber, but I think we could also attract more businesses with a good plan, a good comp plan. I know you've been working on that revision, and a good plan for offering access to high-speed internet. When businesses look for locations, they look for utilities, the utilities that they need to run their businesses. And when families look for locations, they look for great schools, which we have, and they look for vibrancy and vitality in the local economy and places to go eat and have a cup of coffee and go listen to live music and things like that. Access to affordable internet for nearly everyone in Readfield will help all of us. It will especially help older people who don't necessarily have access to internet. And what I've learned in my work is that just because I don't have any problem getting access to internet doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. And it doesn't mean that other people don't have trouble getting access. So being able to provide a tier of service for other folks would be just a huge investment in the community. And not just talking about apples and apples with technology, we're talking about apples and whatever you want to compare it to for providing that access to other people. Not to mention students in the schools who don't have reliable access to internet and maybe have to go to a friend's house to be able to do their homework, no matter how good your school system is. Young people need access as much as possible to those resources. And I think a fiber solution will help do that. I would really love to see a vibrant and vital town center around the Route 17, Route 41, Church Road intersection, including the fairgrounds project that you're going to talk about that I'm going to have to leave before you do, but I support that for the same reasons of community economic development, giving people places to go. I think high-speed internet will help attract viable businesses to that corner. I noticed that all of those buildings are shuttered, and it's just kind of sad. It's sad. Before I lived here, and I lived in Winthrop, when I drove through here, everything was shut. It was just sad. And I think we can do better than that. And I really believe that supporting those business locations and supporting other businesses here in Readfield is going to be really important to sustaining your local economy, our local economy, not to mention improved service and access for residents like me and unknown residents who might be our neighbors who we don't see, who don't have that lifeline, who need it. So I hope you will consider that as part of your deliberation. And I hope that those listening will consider that when they go to the polls to vote. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Hi, my name is Cindy McAdam. I'm on Lakeview Drive, and I just had a couple of questions. Just trying to continue to evaluate. I also read all the minutes, and thank you to all the questions that have come before because they've answered a lot of mine. I was just wondering if the take rate increases and surprises us all. Is there incentive back to the town to pay off or to receive some of that benefit back? Or is that just the risk of Axiom taking that, that they receive the risk as well as the benefit from any increase in take or decrease in take?
I'm trying not to answer you because I'm sitting down.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
I
have a couple more questions.
Exactly what it was.
All right.
Mark from X.
And then the other question I have is there a limit of how many people can take on the 1 gig? Like, can the whole town do 1 gig and the system can't handle it? Is there a limit to the system either now or in the future if everybody were to take on to the maximum? And also wondered, we often have a lot of storms here with downed trees. And how does that work? Does your crew need to come in to fix the wires, or is it handled by, I don't know what happens in a downed wire? Do all of the utilities need to come to fix that, or is that covered by someone who handles the poles? So those are my
Excellent.
questions.
Thank you very much. You may go.
I don't even remember. Yeah. Let me start with the third question, because I remember that one. Yes, we will, on behalf of the town, handle the repairs to the fiber. Fiber is an interesting animal because it is passive, meaning it's not electrified in any way. Therefore, the fiber itself can be touched, unlike the utilities above it, where there's a dangerous situation if those come down. Oftentimes, fiber is not cut. It's quite resilient, so it falls to the ground because of how it's hit. And so those repairs are just putting it back up onto the pole. In the case of a break, it does require somebody to come with a specialized tool and I'll call it fuse the glass, which is what the fiber really is, back together. So that all that has been discussed and we're handling with the town on how that will work, how quickly we come, all of those issues. Second question was, capacity. Gig over a gig. The service will allow me to provide a gig over a gig to every home in town, every single home, even at 100% take rate. So there's not a capacity issue from that perspective. Most people don't want to pay for a gig over a gig. Most people will not pay for a gig over a gig. Most people don't use a gig over a gig. But for the cool people who want a gig over a gig, like me, we can provide that to you. So you will have that and you can have that. So the capacity is not unlimited, but it is significantly, a single strand of fiber can handle over 3 billion telephone calls, single strand. So it is really capacity proof from my perspective, at least for the next foreseeable future. And the third question was? Yes. You'd like me to pay more to the town, right? Yeah, if you do, awesome. I think that's a negotiation with the town through the contract, and we'll be talking with I think that not just Eric, and I think the gentleman on the budget committee explained it well. I think Eric has a very good handle on these issues, and he is driving a hard bargain with Axiom to try to get everything he can for the town. And I think this is another point of discussion of what happens into the future if we do awesome. And we hope we do.
Mark, may I follow up on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I always have one of those. So I think what I heard you say is that when we get to the first renegotiation, evaluation of how the situation is going between the two parties, if we were to have an 80% take rate, we would have a different bargaining position than if we have a 35% take rate.
Correct.
Thank
That's
you.
exactly what you heard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Marty, go ahead.
Yep, thank you. One more question for Axiom and or Eric. Supply chain issues and ability to maintain adequate staffing. We know that both of those are, at least until we get well past COVID forever, that they're big issues. Does Axiom now have adequate staffing to take on another big project like this?
Well, I was going to be flip and say yes and leave it at that, but I'll say it in a little bit of a different way because it's an appropriate question and an important one. From a supply chain standpoint, we have mitigated that supply chain issues in a number of ways. And one of the ways that's important to understand is that there's a process for pole make ready. It's called pole make ready, where the utility has to make space on the pole in order for you to construct a new fiber line. When that process takes 8 to 10 months before you even put up a piece of fiber yourself. So by front loading the purchasing of the materials, those materials will have at least 10 months, 8 to 10 months to come in all fully. So when the pole make ready we are issued a license and allowed to construct, we will have all the materials necessary to construct at the pricing that we are under contract for in the next month or so, if we're successful in the vote. So from a supply chain situation, that's how we are mitigating it. From a labor perspective, we are increasing our labor we just hired 2 people this month. So we are not having a problem experiencing hiring additional labor at the moment. And I don't expect that to be much of an issue. In fact, we thought we would have a hard time hiring a part-time person in a particular community like we're suggesting of doing here. And we had no problem hiring somebody. In this case, it was the town of Georgetown. We hired somebody in Georgetown just recently over the last month and sent them over to Splice School. So I don't anticipate the labor issues being acute for this project. I would also say that we are a provider of both wireless and DSL service in our current network that we are currently phasing out both of those services and building fiber instead. And those 2 technologies require a lot of tinkering and a lot of expense in sending people out to fix and to figure it out. And especially in the wireless world where things can be moved by wind and just it compared to fiber is very, very, very reliable. So the number of people you need to serve a large number of fiber folks is much smaller than a small number of wireless and DSL customers that we serve now with a larger staff. So I don't see this anticipating a problem with staffing or servicing you in a very efficient manner.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer, but going back to the supply chain, so we'd be committing to the purchase of $5 million or nearly that of equipment and cable and, not cable, fiber optic cable, while the negotiations are still going on with CMP over use of their poles?
No, well, they are required under statutory law to allow us to be on the polls. So the process is in statutory language. We will be allowed to do that. It's just a long process. It takes 8 to 10 months.
And that's consolidated, not CMP, correct?
It's both. But both are under constraints that allow us to be on there. I would also say that it is not 5 million in materials that we'll be purchasing. It's quite a bit less than that. There's a lot of labor in putting up fiber. I'm guessing, I haven't looked at the numbers closely, but I'm guessing something around 2 million is more likely. Not that that's not a large number, but it's not 5 million in materials that we would purchase up front that would get us to construction.
We have one more question over here, and unless there are other questions here, there's no one else online. We'll take this opportunity for last questions, and then we'll transition into the fairgrounds discussion if everyone feels comfortable with that. Go right ahead.
Yep, I just had a quick question, knowing that you're trying to purchase things up front so that we can get them at the lowest cost, and we're applying for grants. And I believe I read that grants can't be applied to money already spent. Is there, can grant money go towards labor and not just materials? Is that still viable? His answer is yes.
Thank you very much.
I have a
Go right ahead. Yes, you can come on up here. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, Eric Johnson from Church Road. Eric, I have a question for you. Are the schools going to be able to get this fiber optics?
I don't see why they wouldn't be able to subscribe. They actually already have a pretty good service through the state of Maine, but if they wanted to upgrade, this could be a great opportunity for them to upgrade. In fact, a lot of municipal networks start off connecting things like schools, town offices, fire departments. So they would absolutely have the opportunity to participate in this, just like anybody else.
And do we know the cost that might be in usage spectrum? How much would it be?
Oh, I have no idea what that would look like. We're primarily focused right now on the the residential side of things. If they wanted to join and draw, say, 10 gigabits, we'd have to talk about what that price would look like. I know Mark is able and willing to negotiate special agreements with third-party, anybody that wants to go up as far as their bandwidth. So we certainly would consider it and would try to negotiate something that would be fair for everybody.
And that would be the same thing for businesses in town or businesses that wanted to come into town?
Businesses could subscribe to the regular service tiers, no issues. They would just buy whatever level of service they felt they needed.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I believe we have
Last question.
Marty, go for it. Last question. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a question for the select board. And it's something that we did discuss briefly at another meeting. On June 14th, if for the two articles relating to broadband, if they win that by one vote, how will the select board feel about moving forward with virtually half the town saying no? And it's just, I know what democracy means, but how would you feel about that if you just win by one vote?
I would say the vote stands because that is what democracy is. Anyone else?
So you wouldn't be concerned that virtually half the town does not want the tax rate to go up?
A vote's a vote.
Okay.
I think of course you would be concerned, as Catherine says.
I see you, Greg.
And a clear majority, albeit a one vote majority. So process going forward, and this is going to be a process going forward after the vote, if it's affirmative. So that would be a caveat to proceed with some caution and be cognizant of the concerns that have been expressed in the public hearings that we have had today.
And I would encourage everyone to do what my wife and I did when we filled out our absentee ballots, to read every article carefully and not just go down checking off one column, because for good or bad, the vote is the vote.
Yeah. Thank you, Marty. Greg, I see you. Hang on. Oh, yeah. Greg, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, just one practical question. You know, we live in the land of the nor'easter and the hurricane. So who's responsible for repairing the fiber, and what is their capacity to do so when there's widespread outages?
I think we did touch on that. Eric, do you want to just
Yeah,
go back over
so just like any other large-scale disaster, we would have insurance for certain portions of the network, and we would be relying with an ice storm 98 situation on the federal government for restoring all of our services, power, we can't, roads, anything that gets damaged in a natural disaster like that. We do have a well-established process for federal disaster relief that would cover all of our infrastructure, roads, schools, internet, all of that.
Well, we know that CMP will respond and put the power lines up. Who's responding to the fiber network?
Axiom is responsible for that, Greg. Okay. Mark, yeah, go ahead. You're on your way. You're already up. You're already up.
Yeah, we would have emergency contracts for restoration in a disaster of that type, and we would respond as quickly as we could. In that kind of situation, electricity has to be cleared, and you have to be given an all clear to be able to go onto the lines and repair your service once that's done. So it's hard to know, when you would repair, and everybody always goes back to, and because we all remember the ice storm of 98 and what that brought to our state. So I get it, that it's a reasonable question, but I think that we would, it's in our best interest to restore service also. So we would work hard, and we would have those contracts in place to service you as well as any place else we're serving.
Right. Thank you, Mark. I just want to let everyone know we've spent about an hour and a half on this, and certainly, as Sean reminded us, it is an important issue, but I feel like we have had a lot of robust discussion, both at home and here in person. I'd like to ask if it's possible to transition now into our discussion about go ahead, Carol.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
One thing I do know is all the towns surrounding tried to do this as a group and a coalition, which kind of fell apart, but each individual town is doing this themselves. My concern is if the surrounding towns pass this and we do not, is Readfield going to be an island of old service? And are we going to be municipality that does not attract businesses and attract young families. Seniors, I don't need the latest, greatest electronics, but young families do, teens do, businesses do. We already have septic and well, we go to the dump, there's so many things that we have. I think if we don't do this now, eventually it might be something that we would have to do to keep up. One thing I have not heard in previous meetings, and I thought I was paying attention, is we could use the fiber network for other companies. So when you say we have a contract for 2 years, we've all seen introductory offers that when that introductory offer expires, the price goes way up. But it's good to know we would have options. And if that's the case, then Axiom would have to stay somewhat competitive with the others to keep our business. So that was a new thing I did not realize.
Absolutely, and the contract does require our approval for a price increase. So, and that's for the full 10 years of the contract.
Good. I want to wrap this up with one last question that came in. What does guaranteed speeds mean? Do we not pay if we don't get those speeds? I know, I have a feeling I know the answer, but go ahead, Mark. Finish this up.
We do guarantee the speed 24/7, 365. If you do not, if you have a problem and you're not getting those speeds and it is not a problem with your own interior situation in your home and it's on Axiom, we will prorate you for the time in which you are not receiving that level of service completely.
Excellent. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Readfield resident who is on Zoom. If there is no other discussion or nothing new to bring up, then I'd like to turn it back over to Eric to run us through the section of information about the Fairgrounds Community Project. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you guys very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was a really good discussion. I appreciate all the questions and comments. I will work on some screen sharing here.
Just in case anybody was watching earlier while Eric's bringing that up, I did pass a note to to Dennis asking, what time are we going to switch to the fairgrounds? We kind of thought at 7:30, but here we find ourselves at just after 8. So we do apologize to everybody who might have been thinking we were going to be done at 8 or 8:30, but we didn't have a time limit on our meeting tonight. There is the fairgrounds part, and then Eric, you also have another part after that. Is that correct?
I do. The fairgrounds part, I hope will be a good discussion, but maybe not an hour and a half. And I will be very quick with the remainder of the budget because folks are really, I think, very interested and concerned about these two issues. So,
right. I just wanted to give people an update sort of on where we are in the agenda. So.
Okay. All right. So I'm ready to move on here. In a few seconds, that should come up on the main screen. There we are. And this is the same information that's available in the handouts that are physically present here. So the Community Park and Conservation Project. The goal is to provide more recreational opportunities for our residents and youth while maintaining a balance with conservation and other uses at the fairgrounds property. Town priority for the past few years. Recent activity has been to engage stakeholder groups and develop concept plans and plan development and review with engineering and landscaping consulting services is the most recent development there. And we're actually at about what they consider in the engineering world a 70% plan, which shows pretty much everything, where it's going to be, the size, the location, and it's used for providing cost estimates along with construction and permitting background information. The project scope includes the addition of a softball field, basketball court, kiosk, concession stand, pollinator garden, trails, and associated utilities and structures at the town fairgrounds property. It is a true community park. This is not proposed to be a large athletic complex. This is not proposed to be a private enclave. This is a community park with something we hope for everybody. The focus on minimizing impact on natural areas while delivering built facilities to support sports usage is one that we've tried to maintain throughout this. When we first started this, we were looking much more from a recreational perspective, but we're quickly redirected to review this from a holistic and very balanced, I think, perspective. The plan is similar to one that was originally put forward several years ago, but times change, plans change, and so we have a proposal that reflects input from multiple boards and committees, and we hope and expect and believe that some of the interests of the community following the major change in how people used our outdoor resources during the pandemic and hopefully after. We were facing some challenges with sports fields before the pandemic, and this is just another reminder that we need to do more in that area. Habitat and wetland mitigation on site and other properties like the old landfill site are also being considered, and hopefully we can put pollinators in the forefront in all of our municipal properties that can support that type of vegetative growth. The cost considerations, early projections were 300 to 500,000. The revised engineering opinion, a cost based on current plans and pricing, is about $675,000. That's a pretty stark difference. I don't want to downplay that because it's probably pretty close to a real number right now, given where things are with inflation and fuel prices and all of that. But again, engineering cost estimates, we really don't know. They do work all across the state. They're looking at averages and estimates from other projects. There's a fair chance that that's high, but there's also a fair chance that it's accurate. What I do know is that we have a proposal for up to $500,000 to put towards this project, and that, if it was fully expended, would be about $28 per year for the average homeowner. So a much more modest investment than the broadband project, but one that I think many people see as equally important, if not more in some cases. We are applying for multiple grants. So we expect, and community members, Brent offered to help out with writing some of these grants. With the project that we have right now and the estimated costs, we absolutely need to apply for those grants. We will apply for those grants. And construction really can't begin if and until we have an RFP process and we have a defined cost. And at this point, unless that cost comes in under 500,000, which is probably unlikely, until we get some of those grants. So we do have a bit of a cart and the horse here. But again, just like with the broadband project, by showing our community commitment, by having cash in hand for our match, that makes us much, much more attractive to grant-making agencies. If you have a town meeting vote and funds available, you're much more likely to be successful. And I know that this project is one that will be very attractive to multiple grant-making agencies. Other considerations that we did look at other sports fields, and they do exist in town, but access is limited and they're not practical alternatives. The Readfield Fairgrounds is centrally located. It's connected to our middle school and high school by trails and by sidewalk. It is right near our downtown. Church Road, albeit a little bit busy, is not as busy or unsafe as South Road because it has much better sight lines, and it's closer to the population centers. So there are many, many reasons why that fairgrounds property was looked at and chosen as the priority site. The fairgrounds improvements are consistent with the multi-use purpose of the property. This project was always, or this property, excuse me, was always envisioned to be a multi-use property. We built out trails, we added the ball field, we have been adding bleachers and picnic tables and benches so it can have more of a park experience. But this is a building process, and so we're looking at adding the softball field. And one of the main items of that is that will promote fairness so we can have equal, I guess, opportunity for men's and women's, girls and boys sports. And then we have environmental impacts that are unavoidable. There are some wet spots. The area is heavily clayed. There's a lot of surface water. We will need to do some work that will affect the environment, but those impacts will be mitigated. We do have to go through DEP permitting. We have to go through planning board permitting. So all of those things are being considered and will be pursued if this is approved in June. And construction will be dependent, as I said, upon funding. So we were originally hoping that we could maybe get something started this fall. I think that's very unlikely. I think that the only and the most appropriate course is to get those grant funds together after we have these town funds available and draw down that cost as much as possible. And I think we'll have some success with that. Project plans, they are available at the readfieldmaine.org and also at the town office. I do want to thank the Recreation Board, the Conservation Commission, the Historical Society, the Trails Committee, and others, the Select Board as well, for their work to develop and shape this project. We had a lot of good input and a lot of good discussions, and I very much appreciate the fact that people were able to work together, maybe change direction a little bit, and I think come up with a better result than where we started, which is always what we're looking for outcomes. And again, we have times for questions, and then we will potentially be able to talk some more at the end of the meeting. But I will just quickly flash the two images that we have that show the project scope. The upper right-hand corner is the existing ball field, and the parking lot is existing as well. The other amenities, the basketball court and the softball field that you see there are added, as well as a pollinator garden to the south of the, maybe that's not south, but the lower left-hand corner of the screen. And then as far as the functionality of this, part of this project is, or a big focus of it, is getting more value out of an incredibly wonderful resource that we already have. And so by having this, we can have pickleball and basketball courts. We can have multiple youth soccer fields being run at the same time. We can have large community events that don't fit very well at the beach. Heritage Days is one, and other activities. So this is really a multi-use area, getting a lot of value, hopefully with minimal investment. And I will leave it there and stop my screen sharing and let Dennis take over again.
So this is from a Select Board Budget Committee perspective. I know that when the town receives additional funds, such as the pandemic funds that we received, we are allowed to expend those without going back to town meeting for approval. So if we receive grants in excess of covering $500,000, can we expend those on this project, or do we have to come back to town meeting to increase the cost from 500 to whatever it comes out at?
You have the authority to expend those grant funds for the intended purpose. One caveat, kind of relating to Marty's question, if this is an item that might only pass by, let's say, 52 to 48 or 52 to 46 with 2% undecided, which happens, we do have a lot of blank votes, you might want to consider a special town meeting. You don't have to have a very complicated process like what we do for the standard town meeting. The Select Board always has the option of having an on-floor town meeting to maybe address something like this, or you could do it in November after we've completed the process. So you have options, but I think the direction you get from the vote will help determine what course of action you take.
I have two questions. Oh, sorry. I have two questions online. Number one from Rob Peel. What article, for Article 13, what is the term of the $500,000 bond?
Yeah, so right now we're looking at a 20-year bond. We typically, just like with the broadband project, we match as closely as we can the life of the project or the life of the improvements with the length of borrowing, so that you don't have folks that are, you know, in town now and might not be in town later paying a very large cost or paying costs up front for something that really has a long lifespan. So 20 years is the anticipated timeframe.
The second question is from Readfield resident. Current parking doesn't facilitate one game. How do you project it being able to facilitate more than one game at a time?
I guess I've never seen a parking lot full with one game. Yeah, but
Okay.
I guess maybe we could put lines down so people park more densely. But part of it is that it's a gravel lot and it's not very well laid out. So I think improving layout, if we do have issues of overflow, also with scheduling, I can let Hannah maybe talk about that a little bit. It's not often that we have that happen currently, but you can talk about what you expect in the future, Hannah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric. Hannah, if you don't mind going right up there and doing the dance.
Hannah Flannery, Readfield Rec Chair. In response to the scheduling question, we are in charge of scheduling and set the times. This season, we have staggered the game playtime, which is allowable 2 hours to another half hour, so we don't have overlap of team coming in while the teams are playing. And that's the same thing we would do with multiple fields there that people can use. So we would stagger the scheduling just to accommodate that on game days, on practice days, that we can accommodate one team on each field because that's how it'll run.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That answers all the questions online. If there's anyone here in person, you're more than welcome. Go ahead, come on up and say your name. There we go. Thank you.
I'm Jerry Bly, a longtime member of Readfield Conservation Commission, which has the responsibility for managing the town's conservation lands, which includes the fairgrounds. We spent a lot of time over the past year wrestling with this proposal. It's a very challenging task for us. We have a conservation mandate, and yet we understand that the fairgrounds is to be used for a variety of purposes, and how to meld those has been a challenge for us. So I'm here to share the views of the Conservation Commission recently approved. We've broken it down into really 3 issues, 3 questions. The first is the fairgrounds the best spot for a new softball field? And get my glasses on. You've already heard some of this. There are some strong reasons in favor of that. It's convenient to the village center, schools, the beach. It has the benefit of having 2 fields in one location for things such as summer programs. Use of the combined fields can be used for other athletic activities such as soccer and whatnot, as well as community activities such as Heritage Days and Halloween. And it provides greater utilization of existing infrastructure, the parking lot that we've already invested in. There are also reasons against it. Despite some excellent design work, the project will, as Eric mentioned, have some substantial impacts on the conservation values of the fairgrounds. There'll be loss of important habitat for pollinators, monarch butterflies, which are declining species, may be listed as endangered. Substantially alter wetlands. There is potential availability of alternative sites and differing perspectives on whether or not they would be preferred. Mention of the parking capacity, will it be enough to service the proposed uses? And that the developed uses of the concession stand, basketball court, water, electricity don't necessarily align well with other uses of the fairgrounds, such as the walking trails. And lastly, the cost of the project. And each of the commission members weighed these pros and cons on their own, and I'm here to say that there was no clear consensus on the commission. I would say everyone recognized some of the pros and some of the cons. Everybody weighted them differently, and that's where we ended up. The second question is both proposed design. As Eric mentioned, the Conservation Commission participated in the design process with other interested parties and some really qualified professionals. We pushed for a design that preserved as much of the natural field habitat as possible, both during and after construction, that concentrated the proposed development in one place and avoiding wetlands as much as possible, preserved the aesthetic and the historic values of the fairgrounds to the greatest extent possible, and incorporated planned elements to enhance pollinator and butterfly habitat through landscaping of the project and creation of a pollinator garden. And the commission position is that we support the concept plan that we have most recently seen, that it did in fact attempt as best one could within a very confined space, try to achieve the objectives that the commission set forward. And if the project does proceed, the commission will work to ensure that final development plans include more detailed environmental assessment and follow the above stated conservation objectives. And then the last issue we wanted to present our thoughts on is the future protection of the remaining fairgrounds fields. The Community Park and Conservation Project, note the name, attempts to provide a balance between recreational development and conservation of the fairgrounds property, not just for this project, but for the long term. And if the project does move forward, the commission believes strongly that the final plan adopted by the select board and other town committees should include a stated commitment to permanent conservation of the remaining fairgrounds fields, and that commitment gets incorporated into an update of the fairgrounds management plan that the Conservation Commission will take the lead on.
That's it. Awesome. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks.
Anyone? Good. Oh, let's have. Go ahead, Greg.
Greg Durgan, 104 Winthrop Road here in Readfield. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, the Trails Committee, and I'm on the board of the Historical Society. It should be noted in the information that Eric presented, nice presentation, Eric. I know we disagree, but you did a good job. The plan, in one of the points was the plan is similar to the original project design, and that's in the website also, and in the handout that was at the post office today, the colored one. That's true to a point, but what is left out of that statement is I was on the committee for the first ball field back in 2009 until it was built. That field was built because the owners of where the boys played baseball took the property away. So very quickly, we had to find a place for baseball to be played. It went to the select board, and at the town meeting, which was a public meeting, not the secret ballot type where people got up and spoke what they thought, the plan was approved for the ball field. And it was approved with no town money to be spent to build that field. And that field could not be built until the funds had been raised. That's a little different from this plan. So just to clear that up. And construction did not start until that happened. I'm not going to take up a lot of time. I don't want to, because I recently had letters to the editor in the KJ and the community advertiser stating my thoughts and facts as I know them. And there'll be another letter in the next community advertiser. So please read those. It might help you to vote. The other point I want to mention is that Jerry was just up here and talk about meetings. We've had a lot between the Trails and the Conservation Commission. We've had a lot of meetings about this. Giving approval to the design plan does not mean that we approve the project. No formal vote was taken by Trails Committee or the Conservation Committee or the Historical Society. Okay, so that's some information the public should know. Okay, we struggled greatly to get ourselves involved with the process. We were not asked to be, any of those committees were not asked to be involved at the very beginning. But we somehow worked our way, and want to give credit to Eric for taking that issue to the board and getting us involved with that, all those three committees. So with that said, I encourage people to vote. My letter said I don't have any axes to grind with the select board or the recreation committee. They're volunteers just like the other ones and doing, what they think is best. But Dennis, you said brevity is the soul of wit. I think you gave Shakespeare credit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
I was back here and I'm old like Stevie DeAngelis, and I want to make sure. And Jerry Boy.
Got it.
So I want to make sure we did give him credit. So I'm not trying to be glib, but to me, it's the wrong project, the wrong location, and the wrong time. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, go right up here. Absolutely.
My name is Bob Vitar, and I live on Main Street. A couple of things. I read Greg's article. It was very, very interesting. And I advise people to read it. It's authoritative, historic, and it's valid. Several things I have issue about tonight, and we're talking about this committee. I see, I've received a note here about the cost of the project. And for 500,000, I saw a bond issue that would be 1.2 million. Is that wrong? Or is it just going to be a bond for 500,000?
So the bond will be for 500,000.
It's 500,000, so there is no interest on that? It's just a,
There is interest, yeah.
and what is the total cost of the bond?
It would be a 4% interest. I could get that number for you.
It's 1.2 million was the amount that was.
That's not correct by
It's
any
not,
stretch
okay,
of
then fine,
imagination.
that's good.
No.
I'd like to know what that amount is. If
Yeah,
that's not
I
correct,
will pull that together
yes,
for you, Bob.
thank you very much. Okay, and let's talk about something else.
Eric,
Something,
Bob, if
Yeah.
I can interrupt.
Yeah.
Carol. do
you have
wanna
the number?
read- Do you want to read that, Carol?
So it says the bond principal was 500,000, estimated interest was 138,000. Total estimated debt service was 638,428. That was interest rate of 2.5% over 20 years.
The,
638,000.
that's interest or that's the interest?
No.
That's everything with interest.
It was
Okay.
132,000. Is that what you said, Carol?
138,000 was interest.
Okay, thank you.
It's
No,
on the
that's
ballot.
good, that's good. So it's 630,000 something.
That
Fine.
2.5%,
Excuse me.
that was at 2.5%.
And-
Be somewhat more at 4%.
Yeah, at 3.5 or 3 point, whatever it's going to be, it's going to be more. But thank you. That's really bringing us to me to where I'm concerned, my concern. Only yesterday, JP Morgan, the biggest bank in the world, the biggest bank in the United States, stated, the chairman, Jamie Dimon, said, be prepared, everyone, for a hurricane, an economic hurricane to this country. It does not begin now. It begins in 2023. And he said, at least for the bank, they are rescheduling and they're reevaluating everything that they're doing. And that was a major announcement for all banks and for all economies of the world yesterday. I'm saying it's possible that we should, or at least rethink, as a select board, I would think that one of the important things is to be able to pivot when required, to be able to think in terms of alternatives when emergencies arise. And I think this is an emergency. We have inflation. I just filled up my gas tank in a little old Forester, 3/4 of a tank was $60. Inflation will increase. Jamie Dimon said yesterday that he's expecting gas prices to be $175 a barrel. That's about a 30 to 40% increase from what it is now. I'm saying maybe it would be a good idea to postpone some of the capital spending that we're proposing. And that's my suggestion. And maybe even if it were postponed, we might be able to think in terms of different solutions that may be more compatible. That's it.
Thank you, Robert. I actually have a, oh, sorry. Hannah, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking over this handout, Jerry, and I have a question either Jerry or Greg or whomever. The first item, it says reasons against. Lack of adherence to fairgrounds management plan and the guidance it provides for proposed development projects, including ball fields. And I just called this up and I made a notice, and I'd be interested. I think it's important for people to hear this. On page 3 of the fairgrounds management plan, it says this. Supporters agreed that the acquisition was a wise investment in the town's future to meet public needs as the town grows. The strategic location of the land, its size, its beauty offer unlimited potential for future public uses. The town's comprehensive plan calls for directing future growth to the village area, and still does. Wise use of the fairgrounds property can achieve this goal by providing open space, recreational opportunities, and other public amenities, the fairgrounds can help to make the village area an attractive place to live and do business. And if you'll just bear with me one second. It goes on to say, the first reason it was acquired was because there was a wide range of conservation, open space, and recreational values. Second, the property's location offers the potential for the town to develop portions of the property for public uses that are best located in the village area where they are easily accessible to residents. I feel, can you speak to how are those things disparate, I guess?
Sure. If you look further in the plan where it talks about development activities other than open space, it says that the standard should be, is this the best place for it? Could such development occur elsewhere in a more compatible way?
Mm-hmm.
That is what we're referring to.
And is that in question, Jerry? Or is the Conservation Commission believe that there is a better place for this field?
The Conservation Commission believes that there was not a serious attempt to look at other alternatives. I think I'm being fair in saying
sure
that
even
it's not a rigorous process.
Understood. And is that the rigorousness of that, the diligence of that process is measured by the Conservation Commission? Is it that you feel if they didn't do a good enough job, then that's it?
I wouldn't be so glib as to say that.
Okay.
I would say when we raised this issue on numerous occasions, it was sort of shut aside.
And did you ever receive a good reasoning for that from the select board?
So
Because I know why I feel
the school property was one.
Sure, absolutely, and I've understood that, yeah.
And the answer was, that's school property, that's not town property. We want to do this on town property because we don't want to have to work with them.
Sure. And that didn't pass muster for the commission.
We didn't feel that was ever explored to the extent. Again, there are sentiments on the commission that understand the positive reasons to locate it there. That's why we're not here saying we oppose this field.
Right.
We said we could, as we weighed those pros and those cons, we could not come to a consensus agreement, and we did not want to act in an alternative manner.
And I hear that. I will say this on the record. I don't think the Readfield Elementary School field is anywhere near a starter on this issue. I know I read about it, and it was talked about. Currently, they can't even establish an effective pattern to pick up their children from school. And if I'm not mistaken, there was mention of an RSU 38 meeting at some point where the RSU clearly said they did not want to invest in that field. So I guess that's.
Oh yeah, we're talking about the potential for a collaborative effort at a fraction of the cost, where the town would put dollars into it. And I've heard.
And that's outside of the village area though, right? It would be so hard for folks. I mean, you couldn't walk to the elementary school in case you had a field.
Yeah, I mean, most people drive to the others. So,
yeah.
That was a part of our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part what we felt shortcoming in terms of following the plan as it was presented and adopted by this board,
yeah.
by you individuals.
Yeah.
And we didn't feel that it was followed in as rigorous a manner as we did. I want to be clear, that we did not let that perception of process get in the way of our objective thinking on this project. You have there in front of you what I think is some very clear objective thinking on the substantive reasons both for and against.
Yeah.
So this is not a sour grapes type.
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that, the plan does say, the fairgrounds is there for you to develop. And in fact, I would say that the plan goes so far as to advocate for that. But
I would strongly disagree.
You don't think so?
No,
Okay.
the open space values of that, the passive recreation, is clearly a predominant theme there. We agree that it certainly provides for opportunities. The Conservation Commission approved granting a portion of the fairgrounds to the cemetery to allow the cemetery expansion. Conservation Commission, along with the Trails Committee, led the development of the trail system there. The Conservation Commission did not get in the way of the original softball field proposal. So we've always come at it with a sense of balance there. And this is a bigger proposal, and both in character and size, and it raised those balancing issues substantially.
Well, you answered my questions. Carol?
I have a question for Jerry.
Go for it.
How many acres is the fairgrounds complex, like the whole?
35. But it's the
35
field.
acres?
It's about 35 acres.
And how many acres is this recreational area?
Well, the fields are somewhere on the order of 5 acres total. And it's the field area that this is the focus of here.
I understand, there's still a whole lot of fairgrounds.
Right, but when
area.
talking about habitat, natural field habitat, pollinator habitat, monarch butterfly habitat, that's a small portion of the property. So,
But I think the other part of Carol's question was how much of that 5 acres is the fields, the ball fields area?
Well, I think if you go past the baseball field on the trails and up the hill a little, there's a beautiful sunny field, like just a stone's throw from that ball field. So pollinators will relocate, is what I'm saying.
well, I don't want to get
I
into
don't
a
wanna get into that.
pollinator
I'm just
thing.
pointing out the size
It's native
versus the
vegetation,
total.
that field, and your next door neighbor there, Ralph, was out there with us one evening. The native fields there have an abundance of monarch butterfly dependent species, so milkweed, goldenrod. So it is really quality habitat. We mow it in a special regime to provide for that.
I'm just pointing out that the town land, we're asking for a small portion. That's all.
Yeah. I have, go ahead, Ram.
Getting a little bit off topic, but somewhat related.
All right,
Question
I'll
for
stay
Eric
back, don't worry.
and any member of the budget committee who wishes to chime in. In regard to the total capital cost that we are talking about, broadband and the rec project. I know you looked at this very carefully. Could you speak to the burden of debt service over the 20-year period as it stacks up against the town's undesignated fund balance and its integrity over the long haul to be viable enough to offset future mill rate increases? I know we talked about this, and I don't believe that either group would have recommended to proceed if we didn't have a comfort zone that the town's resources could manage this. But from a more formal perspective, could you speak to that, please?
I'll try to. I don't have all the information in front of me, but we did look at the impact of the borrowing on the undesignated fund, and it does put us slightly, below the threshold for 1 year because of the $5 million number. Once we get past that and we're paying debt service, it's just a mathematical anomaly. It goes back to standard fare because the expense line is no longer $5 million for that project the following year. But no, this project, both of these projects are viable, are sustainable. The question is whether people are willing to pay for them. The recreational improvements at the fairgrounds, those are very much a quality of life improvement. So people might be paying $28 a year more on average for that improvement. And if that's something that they agree with, then they should vote for it. The broadband is a little bit different. That project has the opportunity to actually, for residents who subscribe, could have much of that tax impact offset by what they're paying for the service. So it wouldn't be like they're doubling their internet costs. They would have one service fee offset by another service fee. And the impact is much less in that sense. But altogether, these come up to $5.5 million in borrowing potentially. And the debt service on that is $350,000, $400,000 a year, something like that. I'd have to look back at the exact numbers, but that's something that we can manage. The question, and this is one I've talked about with other folks in town who have been concerned about the cost of this, is, we are as a community trying to build and add value and make our community better. And the question is, what do we trade off for that? Can we, at what point do we say the taxes are too high and we just can't provide municipal services anymore? It's a challenge. The municipal portion of the budget is about 17 to 18% of the tax bill every year. 17 to 18%. 5% is county taxes, 75 to 77% is the RSU budget. We work very collaboratively, and try to minimize tax impacts by considering all three of those pieces. And we're going to talk about that in the budget presentation as well. But I think it's really important to just ask that question. When do we stop investing in ourselves because of other costs? And that's a decision every individual property owner, homeowner, voter is going to have to make. And so I guess I appreciate your question, Ralph. But the short answer is that, yeah, we have the financial capacity. The question is whether we have the financial will, and we'll find out on June 14th.
So to paraphrase, basically,
Ralph, can you get closer to the mic?
if the town moves ahead with these and they get approved at the budget, at the warrant meetings, we're not putting the town in any significant financial jeopardy in terms of its reserve capacity and its ability to manage its finances over the next 10 to 15 years.
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
I have a question on the line, and then if I know from long ago, and Travis, we got you guys. Absolutely. Thank you. But we'll make sure we get to you. Greg, if you want to unmute and go ahead and ask your question, you are on.
Thank you. Hey, just really no question, just some comments. I've served on the road committee in this town, the Conservation Commission, currently on the Trails Committee, and probably on the rec board before too long. First off, I want to thank all the stakeholders for their input. No project like this is easy to execute, but it does become better because of the input of people like the Conservation Commission and the Trails Committee, and obviously the rec board. When I think about this kind of thing, I think in terms of context. I moved to Readfield in 1998, and I can remember that the fairgrounds consisted of a hole in the stone wall and some fallow fields that the Heritage Days, I think, had some activities there, and that was pretty much it. And so it really wasn't a very relevant space for the town. And since then, folks can make up their own minds on how much more relevant that space has become. And I know that when I was on the Conservation Commission, we brought the subject of pollinators up, and it is important. But I would also think in terms of context there, we have hundreds of acres of conservation land in town, and I'm all for managing a lot more of that for pollinators. And then I guess for me, it's about the relevance of that space to the community in terms of the quality of place that we have here, its value to the community, and our quality of life. And going back to my time on the road committee, we recapitalized all the roads in this town that have yielded benefits for the last 2 decades. We borrowed a fair amount of money, and part of the rationale at the time was interest rates were pretty low. They were actually higher than they are now, and interest rates are going up. So for me, the argument about whether or not to borrow money is kind of a moot one. Interest rates are still historically low. Yes, inflation is high, but in the final analysis, this kind of investment is going to return to anybody, any property, any homeowner that lives within walking distance of the fairgrounds. manyfold in terms of the value, not only of the quality of life, quality of place, but in fact, property values. So again, I'd like to thank everyone involved in this, and I fully support this project.
Brett, and then Hannah, you're on deck. Go ahead. And just because we have a lot of folks, might put a little, say, hey, you got 2 minutes.
You can probably tell how I felt about this.
Oh, sure.
A little more torn on this project.
Yep.
I have a 3-year-old. The rec board for doing the egg hunt, stuff like that. I think you guys do a great job in a lot of your programming. I do similar type of work in my day job, and a few of the things I wanted to get clear in my head was, what's the budget line item for the wetland compensations for the property? There's 17,000 square feet of impact, which would put us into, I think, a tier 2 permit, which I think requires wetland compensation. Is that part of the budget?
Our engineers have determined that that's not the case, and that there isn't sufficient impact to merit compensation. That
Okay,
level,
great.
that threshold was not met. Yeah.
That's good news. The other part I had is I helped with the project that expanded the parking lot there. That was part of the grant that the Conservation Commission put forward to do a lot of the trails and infrastructure on the trails at no cost to the taxpayers. But the one problem we had in that project was closing it out due to town staffing. We had the gravel and crushed stone that needed to be laid around the edge of that parking lot. Was the only thing holding us up. All the contract work had been completed. The only thing that was holding us up was the town's ability to do that work. And that took months and many emails on my case to try to get that to a resolution so we can close out that RTP grant. So I didn't know, are we capable at town staffing levels, or this might trigger an increase in staffing at this point for maintenance and such?
Well, so 2 parts. Apologize, and I think I apologized before for the shortage of staffing. We've had staffing challenges through the pandemic and before with turnover in the maintenance department. I think we've gotten a much better handle on that now. We have some great staff. We actually have somebody working 3/4 time this summer to supplement that. So that's the first part, is that yeah, we can't always provide all the services all the time. With this project, as far as the construction phase goes, the intent is not to have the town do much of this, other than what we can do perhaps to help lower the cost. Things like maybe pulling part of the fence and storing it to the sides. We don't have to pay a contractor to do it. Also, a lot of that work we're planning on having volunteers help out with. And I know there'll be a lot of people wanting to help out with this. We're again presenting as much as we can the worst case scenario for this. And the last piece you asked about was, what was the last piece, Brent?
Oh, I was just talking about maintenance capacity.
Oh,
to
yeah,
Take care of the long-term.
Yeah, so
care of these assets.
we will have about twice as much mowing as we have there now. We may at some point need to put in a trash receptacle and check that periodically. I think that certainly within the realm of what we could handle as a small maintenance department. There will, of course, be added costs when you add amenities because you add time. So that's, I guess, one of those things that would be absorbed, but shouldn't be overlooked. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, yeah, and I do this with all my projects, just encourage a maintenance fund, whoever's on the board, like maybe we could do fundraisers or such to cover those costs. So really, those were my only questions. I just wanted to know.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, Linus. Hannah, you're up. Then Travis, you're on deck. And then you're in the hole. Thanks.
Hannah Flannery, Fog Road, Readfield. I'm the chair of the rec committee. I just want to share my passion with the rec committee. I've served for 7+ years, helped run, organize, coach all of our sports programs. My passion lies in every kid having the opportunity to play, every kid in this community. And so that is why this project is important to me, so that every kid has the opportunity. So we have an outdoor basketball court. So we have fields that match up. So the whole outfields can be used for soccer. So we are not competing with anybody else to get access for kids to play in this community. A lot of people talk about sports going to an elite level, travel, everyone has to pay to play, and that costs a lot of money. And that is not where I want our sports programs to go in this community. And I know a lot gets talked about us sharing with the school. We went to a facilities meeting a week ago and asked about, as a teacher in our community, as someone who's the gym teacher at the school and also serves on our rec board, talked with facilities, and the school said absolutely no investment by the school is being made. You are free to do whatever you want, which is great for them, but not really a collaboration, as I've heard other people asking if we could collaborate with the school. So just putting that one out there. I also wanted to say, initiated and asked about this project in August of 2020. I went to Eric and remembered the outlay of a project that was on the wall. And by no means did we exclude anyone else out of this project when we started. We were simply asking what could be done to help develop more fields into a complex that seemed to have a plan drawn up for that. So, is this plan exactly how the rec department wanted it? No, but we collaborated with everybody on this project to make it what it is today. Another clear point I want to make tonight is there are 2 articles. I hear a lot of talk about the investment and the cost of this. To me, it's a no-brainer. Absolutely none. The full community deserves this space to be what the proposal shows. But there are 2 articles. One is a support of the project itself, and the second one is to vote on the funding. So please take that into consideration when you go to vote, that you can vote in support of the project and also disagree with the funding. There's 2 different votes there. We're also applying for substantial grant funding, but we do need, as Eric stated, municipal support that shows that this is a supported project before they give us $500,000 or whatever they're going to give us to support this project. So I urge you to see the benefits to our whole community in this fairgrounds community project and how we've worked collaboratively.
Thank you. Oh,
And I have a question. Can you speak to, because I know you guys have done a lot of work and a lot of creativity with the different grants. Can you speak to some of the things you guys are looking towards?
So one is a Alfond grant. Harold Alfond does a lot for the Central Maine community specifically, does a lot for sports programs. He's built countless field houses, turf facilities, all through Central Maine. They fund up to 50% of the project, so you give them an amount, and they also want you to see that you are working towards fundraising for the other part, which is really. The second grant is, I don't know the full name of it, but he does. Land Water Conservation Fund. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they just granted Winthrop like 1.2 million, same fund. Yeah, so that's the second one. We're working through that because of the dates of when that is due and when they evaluate that application. So,
and you have talked in the past about the National Guard.
So that is also an option. Greg, who spoke earlier, knows a lot more about that program, and I just want clarification because they do the work. It's a community project that they do, but I'm unclear about if it needs to be fully funded before they come in and do the work, like how that actually breaks down. So I'm still looking on clarification on that program.
thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Travis, you're up.
Hi, my name is Travis. I teach phys ed at the high school and I coach at the high school for soccer and basketball. I just want to speak in my support of this and all the hard work that people have done to get this to where it is. And a couple of things I want to go over is you talk about cost. A couple of people did. It looks to me like at most it'd be $225 a month to pay for something that would have a huge impact on the kids in our community at all levels. Whether it be starting when they're young for rec for second or third grade, or it could be all the way until they're in high school using the facilities over there as well. I'm also speak on behalf of like using the facilities at our school districts are getting harder and harder to do. You know, if you're a coach like I do, I'm lucky that I can get access. If you are a citizen, you can't get access. Like you can hardly ever get access to a gym or to a field to use. So that's why it would be a very poor decision to ever put it on school property, because then school property would own it, and then there's a much more hassle that you have to go through for things. So that's why that would not be a good option. And then just speaking again on behalf of our community and our kids, the kids love sports in our schools at all levels, whether it's the young kids or all the way to high school. I think we have a lot of community members that love it. They support it. And I think it's a great opportunity for all kids to have more of a chance to get out, be outside and play instead of being inside playing video games and, on their phones for most of the day. So this is a great opportunity. I'll go further and I'll say our rec does a tremendous job providing physical activity for our kids where sometimes they do not get it. It's amazing how many kids are involved in rec. And with the few, as a teacher, with as few phys ed opportunities as kids have in our community in elementary school, I think we need the rec for physical activity because most of our kids in school at the elementary level are only getting 30 minutes a week of activity. So these fields will provide more, and I think everybody has put a lot of time into this. I think, like Hannah said, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it. After it, yeah, thank you.
He was in front of me, so we can go first.
Oh, sure, yeah, go right ahead, Greg. You know what it is.
Just one more thing, Dennis, I think you're trying to bait me. You talked about the naughty boy. You mentioned the CSD RSU 38. Did anybody from the select board talk to Sean Drinkwater, who's the head of maintenance and grounds, about possibly? No, I know the answer. It was a setup.
Okay, gotcha.
The board did not. The offer was made twice and the board refused it. Hannah, who'd you talk to at the rec committee? Rec committee talked to which school?
Let's microphone and not back and forth, please. Yeah. I'm sorry, Greg.
Does anybody know who Hannah talked to at the school?
Hannah
I
May.
bet Hannah does.
Specifically, that's what we had two people go to a facility.
Go to who?
Go to a facilities meeting, which is run by Sean Drinkwater, the maintenance person. And the specific facilities committee that's.
Well, back in the fall, Sean was very willing to sit down. They would love to talk to you about the elementary school. That field and the concession stand and a basketball court could probably all be made really easily under $700,000. I'm not anti-kid, I'm not anti-athletic. We need a new softball field. There's no doubt about it. Where, when, how, cost, that's all. Now I'm going home and eat dinner.
Go ahead.
I was at the facilities meeting that they're talking about, and it was just asked if community members could come and fix up that field at the elementary school, the Readfield Elementary School. It wasn't asked if the RSU was going to do it.
Yeah.
Or would be involved or partner.
And they still said
They said that they were fine with people coming in and fixing up the field, community members, if they wanted to use it. Right, at their own cost.
Yeah, I've never met Sean Drinkwater. I have no interest, but when it was proposed, I can tell you, it was something that I felt like was it was just such a non-starter that it didn't make any sense. It was not practical. That school, they have a hard time parking there for the games they do have. So it just seemed like such a beyond practicality that it just, I have no interest in it. You may get it.
Thank you very much, everyone. My name's Matt Magnuson. I live on the North Wayne Road. This past fall, my wife, our two children, and I moved to Readfield. Prior to coming to Readfield, I had many years experience coaching youth sports on multiple rec departments, and there is something special in this community. This past fall, I coached both my son and daughter's basketball team. I was amazed to see the hard work, the dedication, the commitment that the kids had. But what impressed me even more were the parents, the love, the support, the dedication the parents had coming to the events, supporting the kids, doing everything that they did to make it successful and make the rec program successful. For 19 years, I've worked for the Maine Department of Corrections. During that time, I've supervised juvenile offenders, I've supervised adult offenders. I currently work at the Maine State Prison. And during those 19 years, the common thread of everyone I've worked with, They have lacked pro-social supports and pro-social activities in their youth. When I look at this community, we have the supports. We have teachers, we have mentors, we have coaches, we have parents who want to commit and help these kids. What we don't have facilities. As a coach, coaching young kids, it's hard to get them anywhere. It's hard to get them on a field, on a court. It's hard to bring them together. When I look at the financial commitment, I'm a taxpayer. I understand financial burdens. I understand where the market's going. But for $2 a month, what we're asking is let's invest in our children, let's invest in our future, and let's invest in this community. For $2 a month, we can take the people that we have that are giving this commitment, the rec board, the parents, everyone else, we can find a space and we can do really good things that will last a long, long time. When we talk about location, this location is extremely important. And I get that the ground may not be the best. However, the immediacy location to the schools, providing an opportunity for children when that last bell rings to walk down that path and to get on that field, to be doing pro-social activities, things that we want our kids doing instead of going down the wrong direction. I've seen too many people go down the wrong direction. I've seen what those consequences are. I know what the cost to incarceration is. And it starts here. So I am a huge supporter of this project, a huge supporter of this location. And I ask everyone else to look at the financial impact as a minimal investment in the future of our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve, are you up because you want to speak? Because we have her next. Okay. Gotcha, absolutely. Yeah, go right ahead and then actually let her go, please. I want to keep my word. I want to keep my word. Sorry, Jerry. Yeah, absolutely. That's Greg.
Hi.
Greg, we'll get to you in a second, buddy.
Cindy McAdam again, and I have a son who's in 4th grade and he's currently using the fields, and it would be exciting to have the more people involved, the more exciting and beehive of a community that will feel. I do have high concerns in the amount of parking to support 2 games going on at the same time because the current parking does completely fill up for one single game because it's not necessarily 1 car per family anymore. You have grandparents coming or parents coming from different places of work. And as much as we like the thought of people walking there, a lot of people drive and it just is what it is. Also, if we're going to be using this for Readfield days, etc., I'm counting about 50 parking spots. And I just, in creating a 500,000 facility, I know as a meeting center, parking can be the biggest pain point in any facility if it's not thought about in advance. And so I highly encourage you to take a look at that. Another thought as a mom of kids who are playing sports, there are a lot of people with different age kids. And you know, if there's a way to have a small playground area nearby that can support small children so that while big brother's playing, little brothers can be playing over here instead of running off onto the trails away from view. Same thing with the basketball court that is also away from view, which will be, you know, I'm just thinking of if we're doing this, let's really do it right and not just try to compromise away any benefit that anybody would see. I also have concerns about the garden. I'm not sure if new things are being planted there, but I have been part of wonderful ideas of new arboretums and gardens being planted, and within a year or 2 they die and they look sad because they're not maintained. And so I just, conserving, yes, growing new things, you know, maybe we take this small 5 acre of the 40, 35 acre land and really do it right as a community park surrounded by conservation with some conservation in between, but I really have concerns of conservation taking it over and taking away all of the good pieces so that we're just left with a really pretty baseball field like we have now.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Greg, if you are still with us on iPad 2, you may speak.
Sure. I just wanted to second what the fellow said about the availability of facilities at the school. One of the things I was involved in over 20 years ago was bringing football back to Maranico. And I can tell you that even then, and even after the new ball fields were built behind the school, it was nearly impossible to find a place to have practice. And the idea of talking to the maintenance person about scheduling ball fields is not the way things work there. The way it works is the AD. So I think that if anybody wants to talk to the school about adding yet more load to their athletic fields, the athletic director is the person to talk to. And I'm pretty sure that person is going to tell you there's no room at the inn. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Jerry, you can step up.
One last comment. In fairness, part of my thinking personally, I want to speak for the rest of the Conservation Commission, in factoring into all this. Also on the warrant, there is a commitment and investment in future open space, something that Eric pushed, that you all approved, that the Budget Committee approved. And in my mind, that was a positive factor to that we're not just losing space here, but we're also investing in open space as well. And so on behalf of the Conservation Commission, I want to compliment you all, Eric in particular, for really pushing that. And that is, that is part of the formula, at least in my mind, as to how we evaluate such projects.
Thank you, Jerry. Hang on one second. I've got one online, Robert, and then you'll be next. Elaine, if you want to ask a question, you certainly can.
All right, thank you very much. I can stop my video. The first thing I just wanted to say is that for those of us who question either the design or whether it's appropriate to pursue this project at this particular time, we are not anti-children. So let's put that right out there. For the sake of perspective, is it true that because of these two very expensive projects that we've been talking about all evening, the town is going to have to push off the purchase of a new and apparently very needed fire truck for at least the next budget cycle, which means that with all probabilities, it's going to be, again, more expensive than what we anticipate right now. So if somebody can address that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, I'll just take that one. No, it's not true. The decision to push off the fire truck was made in conjunction with the fire chief based on need. We're all, in all areas, trying to do the best we can with what we've got and make wise use of resources. And so the fire chief said, yeah, we can get a couple more years out of it. We can help smooth budget impacts potentially, but it's not being put off because of these projects. It's being put off because we don't need it right now. And we did talk about it. Should we put this in the budget? Because borrowing costs were low. And we actually had a couple lengthy and involved budget committee discussions about whether or not that fire truck should be included. And I talked with the chief about it a few times. But the decision was that we don't need it now and that we can go a few more years without it. When it's needed, it'll come up on the budget, and I'm sure it'll be approved.
Thank you, Eric. Robert, you're up.
Brief comment, Robert Guitar, Main Street. Fellow back there, I liked what he said, and this woman too spoke about something. There's a larger vision, which I've spoken to several people about. And part of what I thought was the compressed design of the field that's already been made for so many other things. And it seems that, yes, it's 4 or 5 acres of a larger space, but more than that, the problem I saw was that it doesn't provide for the expansion needed for a bunch of other things. I mean, we have young boys right in the middle of our streets riding bicycles on Route 17 because they're trying to do some kind of exercise. There's no place for them. Someone said, well, let them go to the fairgrounds. Well, that's not, we don't want 10 bicycles going up and down the fairgrounds. That would be counterproductive. We have other things that we need. We have boys with skateboards. We have lots of things in this town that need some concern. The fellow spoke about other sports. This woman speaks about it, anticipating that, and I think that's very important. So my feeling is that this is premature. What we should be doing is looking at a space that's more, that provides for an expansion that's necessary and probably within the budget that exists. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. We are, oh, go ahead, Marty. Sorry, buddy. Anybody else?
Marty Hanish, Budget Committee and RCC as well. Again, I'm speaking as an individual. Being on both of these groups, I come across more information than some people who are not that involved would be aware of. And so I wanted to talk about 2 things. First, the Ballfield Fairgrounds project as it affects the 2022-2023 budget. And then as the follow-up in 23-24, assuming that.
Sorry, Marty, the Celtics game, I think, just started. Go ahead.
At least there was no big hook pulling.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the immediate impact, the immediate financial arrangement, and also the longer-term impact. Back in 21-22, the Budget Committee was given a draft budget that had $55,000 for ball fields, offset by $45,000 in donations. That was probably based on what it cost to do the original ball field, which was in a more favorable location. That jumped up to $500,000 as the cost of the project, again being covered by spreading the cost out over 20 years, but still $500,000. Then last week, the RCC received an email from Eric saying that the cost now looks like more like $700,000 because of increases in fuel costs, and diesel fuel in particular. That's a 40% increase in the project just for fuel. And at this point, the other thing that I knew, I was aware of at the time was that the engineering design was only 70% complete. There were still issues to be addressed about wetlands and drainage, to drilling a well, and so on. And I wonder whether those costs are going to are adequately included, even in $700,000. Now, I know that an effort is being made to offset the cost by getting grants, and I applaud that. I think it's fair to say that the current parking lot is what it is because of a grant that was
a grant that was brought in by the RCC. So, but even if we bring in $100,000 or $150,000 in grant money, we're still over budget. And again, let's not forget that the engineering specs are not completed and that we haven't gone out yet with an RFP to get prices. And there are still other things that could be coming up. I think it's short-sighted to put off the parking lot expansion. It's not adequate at this point. And there are other things, for example, with the big problem with farmlands becoming contaminated with these forever chemicals, it may be a lot more expensive for us to get clean fill to implement the project. That everybody is aware of those PFAS, and getting fill that is certified to be pure it's probably going to cost a lot more. And if we don't do that, you'll be hearing from the abutters because they don't want their wells contaminated by chemicals that never break down. So I think that it is premature for this project to be put out to the public. I know there was a big rush to do it, and it's out there, so there's going to be a vote, and it'll probably be a positive vote. But I think we rushed this out there. And I think the same principle applies to the broadband. There are still too many open questions. Looking forward to 23-24, and I'm not counting debt service because that's really the result of whatever we do this year. But as I understand it, the select board budget objective is to add a town-funded position to oversee parks and recreation. The select board budget objective included create and fund a parks and recreation position to develop and support programs and events at the beach/fairgrounds using ARP money. The ARP is the American Recovery Act. All for using that federal money to improve things in the town. But I learned very early in my career that you can't fund ongoing positions, permanent staff positions, with one-time monies. So I think that we may be seeing in the follow-up to implementing this project that there were going to be impacts on the town operating budget aside from debt service. And the comment that I've made in the budget committee many times, and I think we do this well in some areas, but not others, is that we have to look at the cost of a project over its lifetime. Not just to look at what it's going to cost to build a ball field and other things at the fairgrounds. So, certainly we need to be sure of our numbers on that level. But there will be costs down the road. There may be other costs that aside from debt service. So I'm just making that I don't think is going to affect anybody's position on how to vote this year. But I do think that it's something that we really need to do a better job of looking at the operating cost impacts of capital budgets. That's my comment.
Sean? Yeah, so hi everyone, Sean Keegan from Select Board. I think many of you that know me know that I ran for Select Board because of projects like this, because of my volunteering with REC for many years and being a part of the community. And a big reason is because I want to keep my friends in this town and I want to keep my kids' friends in this town. And these are the reasons why they're going to stay. We have such amazing coaches in this town, and just the passion for some of the work that's going on from like these Magnuson guys and what they did all winter. I'm going to tell you some of the numbers of the kids that they've supported just in this last year. So soccer was a 7-week program. We had 91 kids. Baseball is an 8-week program. There are 83 boys playing and 35 girls. We also have T-ball and there are 25 kids. Basketball is a 15-week program and there was 175 kids from this town that played this winter. That's unbelievable, the amount of kids. And that's just through grade 6, by the way. That's kids from pre-K to grade 6. It does not include any of our middle school teams or high school teams. I hope people can listen to all the pros and cons of this and really see how good a compromise this has been. And I really appreciate Jerry and Bruce and the way they've talked about it as a compromise, because that's how I do see this as a selectman, as someone that's passionate about these kids' sports. I missed my daughter's game tonight. And, you know, we missed your son's game tonight. You know, we're all doing these things all the time. So I just wanted to say that and just hope you can make sure you get all the information through many sources. Read everything, read everybody's op-eds. They're all important. They all give you facts from point of views and will tell you to help you make a decision. So thanks.
Catherine, go ahead.
I just feel a need to respond to you, Marty. I have been on the select board. This is finishing my 12th year. And I would say that through all of those 12 years, all the various select boards have always acted responsibly with their capital projects and planning forward. I was here when we first developed our capital investment plan, which we didn't have previously. Andy was on the budget committee with me at the time that we did that. I think we've been very responsible, extremely transparent. We have always planned ahead for maintenance and for future costs, and always looking for the future problems that might come up and planning for those in advance. And I think that's proven by the fact that all of those capital projects over the years have been approved by the voters of Readfield. I'm not saying that we should stop doing those things, but I think we have been doing them. And I just want to thank all of those select boards for their due diligence.
Excellent. Marty, go ahead, and then Bob will hear from you.
Catherine, I have a lot of respect for you, and I don't want to turn this into an argument, but
Me either.
I would agree with what you said as far as capital expenditures are concerned. But when a version of the budget warrant was put out with explanations, there was nothing in there saying, be aware that we're going to have to add a staff position next year to coordinate and manage all these programs. That was not even, the only place that was mentioned was in the select board goals. Now, but I don't want to get into an argument on that. Sean, I'm very happy to hear the numbers that you just quoted. And I would have had more respect for the process, the planning process, the evaluation process, if that information had been presented. As far as I can see, there may have been a lot of planning and analysis behind the scenes, but I never saw a systematic select board approach to the 4 criteria in the Fairgrounds Management Plan, which incidentally is an official town document. And I brought that up at other select board meetings. And things like using the elementary school field. One time somebody on the board said that's stupid. Today it was just dismissed as a no-brainer. That's not an honest, excuse me, I shouldn't say honest. That's not an adequate fulfillment of doing the research that's required in a town document. It's not just something, you know, that we made up and just said this is, you know, and it was adopted by the board when it was submitted. So I just wanted to make that my last comment.
Gotcha.
My next to last, I'm in favor of athletic facilities for the children. Whether this one is being done correctly is another story. That's,
Thank you. If you want to speak, could you just go back there and get in line because there's going to be a lot of people. Go ahead, Travis, you're up first. Sean, you can be in there. Welcome back from your game. I hope they won. Bruce, if you want to be a part of that, Bob, too. It just helps me visually keep track of everyone. Go ahead, Travis.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I doubt that this project had anything to do with adding a position. And I'll add to that, since you brought it up, this is one of the few towns that I've ever seen that haven't had somebody managing the rec department. You've got Hannah, who probably spends over 40 hours a week some seasons, and she does it for free. So if that was added, then it wasn't anything to do with this project. But when you bring it up in future, I would strongly encourage that we have a paid position for our rec department that most schools, most places do have.
Thank you, Travis. Bob, you're up next, and then Sean.
Very brief.
Thank you.
Marty, I appreciate what he says. I appreciate his vision. He's bringing a different perspective, and essentially he's looking at the elements of this entire process that bothered me. And actually, that's a bad word, not bothered, it concerns me. And everybody here has one goal. We're all thinking about one vision, and his is looking at the future. There was a question earlier that said, well, maybe could be a reference to what I was saying about being concerned about the financing. That's not the government financing. It's what the town will be able to afford, the citizens of this town. And we are looking at a bunch of things that I think we must be able to think in terms of crises and not just in terms of normalcy. In a normal time, yes, we can expand our purchases and so on. But if we're looking at something that may have contingencies beyond every day, then we've got to think about them differently. And that's my concern right now.
Thank you.
Sean said something about I'm absolutely amazed at the amount at the dedication of all the people who are here tonight. I really am. It's wonderful. They really do. And the advances and what we do, for what you do for the children who are here is just it's wonderful. So I don't think anyone says anything about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Sean, you have the floor.
Thank you. Sean Roderick, I live in Readfield on 40 Lane. First, the project, I think Travis hit it on the head, not to repeat, but a rec position versus what we're talking about, two totally different things. And again, I'm very surprised we don't. I came from a very small town and there was somebody who was in charge of the rec programs. But there's a lot of opportunities beyond for everybody. This project benefits, you can use the school fields. Well, the rec programs come last when it comes to the school fields. And my children and all these children, the games I've with us at, they're not the last priority. And this project can benefit everybody in the town. Like there isn't a place where you can go shoot hoops. I have friends who come into town. Why don't we go play ball? Well, there's nowhere to go play ball like that. Well, and when it comes to the cost, if it goes over, then you have to, it's still, if someone can correct me if I'm wrong, it's still going out to RFP for the bid, for the pricing. This isn't the end all be all. And there are grants and there are businesses that want to help. Tell us, like I've kind of been bringing it up. I talked to Hannah about it. There are people that are like, tell us what to do and we'll do it because we see this as a benefit. But this benefits everybody from the top to the bottom. Like I'm not like from 70 to 5. And so I just think this is a great investment. I know I've been critical of the internet, but I'm a huge fan of this and will do whatever I can. And my son on the way from his ball game, we were listening to this on the Wi-Fi and he said to me, he says, Dad, you got to go down there and you got to speak in favor of this for me. So
there you go.
Thanks, Austin.
Bruce, you are up. I just want to let everyone know that we are entering our third hour. And if there are other comments or things like that, areas we have not explored, I recommend taking this opportunity. Otherwise, Bruce, you're going to wrap us up.
Good,
We're
because I have a
entering
question I think that will help.
Oh, yeah,
wrap us
enter our
up.
fourth hour. Gotcha.
We're in our 4th hour. We're
Okay.
finishing the 3rd.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be very brief.
Thank you, Bruce.
I chaired the select board for 5 years prior to Dennis with Andrew. And as a person, as an individual voter, I'm gonna vote yes on these articles. I think they're very important. I think there's equity. I'm extremely bent towards conservation and land preservation, probably more so than many people in town. However, I think this is in our core part of our community and it makes sense for it to have multi-use. So my final question is, what does the select board and what does the budget committee recommend for votes on this? And I can go ahead and answer it if you would like. You both have recommended a yes on these items. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you.
Correct.
That is correct. Excellent. If there is no more discussion,
I'd like to make a comment.
please make a comment now then,
Unless Ralph
Catherine.
wants to make it.
Yeah,
I will defer
Go.
to you,
Go.
So
because my
Go.
time is getting short.
gotta
what
go.
was spoken about in funding a rec position was never put into the budget. It was part of our select board goal setting discussion last year. At the time, we thought that the pandemic funds might be able to be used and that we would do a expansion at the beach possibly and try and build a bigger rec program and that we would have funds to cover that for about 3 years. And as the rules developed, which they've changed constantly, as the people spoke to about the broadband funding rules also, we realized that those funds could not be used for that purpose. Then they changed it later, and now actually we probably could have, because they basically said, oh, you can spend it on anything. So this is what the federal government has done. And so that's the beginning and the end of having a rec department. We realized that what we had talked about and the funding for it did not go together. So therefore there was no more mention of that. There is no plan that the select board has talked about, correct me if I'm wrong, about developing a rec department with a paid staff at this time. It was an idea we had. We thought we had a way to fund it. We found out we didn't. So we said, can't do it. We had lots of people come forward from the community asking us to please do something to have fields that would be open all the time. Because the schools, by their law, closed all the fields during the pandemic and people wanted to be outside. And that's where the impetus for this project came from. And so we were trying to respond to the community desire at large to fulfill a need that people were expressing. We don't make the decision. All we've done is facilitated the discussion. We've tried to make the best plans we can to put out there to give all of the public who get to vote all the information they can have so that they can make the decisions, because that's the way our town works. The voters make the decision, the select board is then bound to abide by that and to see that those things occur. Thank you.
Anyone else? Marty, close us out here.
Okay. I think a couple of times tonight, discussions may have gotten a little bit close to being contentious, but the voters will decide on the 14th. And I would encourage the chairs of the Budget Committee and the Conservation Commission to commit to being, those groups will be available after the vote, whether these are up or down or up, to work with the other groups and the select board to make things move forward in the best possible way.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, Eric, do you want to?
I'd like to just let folks know that the information that's available in the packet is also available on the website. And this budget is essentially unchanged from the draft that was provided at the.
Yes.
Yay,
Yeah, thank you.
So budget information is available online. We're all available for questions. And I do want to thank everybody. This is the closest thing we've had to a town meeting type discussion since I've been here. So I appreciate the discussion and dialogue as long as it may have gone.
Excellent. If there's nothing else, Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, Bruce, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was his last word.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I only be a brief minute. I want to use one budget item to kind of illustrate something. And I'll be very quick on this. At candidates night, we had one of the candidates talk about the select board voting a raise for themselves. And basically, that came from myself and Chris Sammons, who were going off the board. Your select board was paid $650 a year, and we thought it ought to be a little bit more because we wanted to encourage people who might have kids who are younger than us to perhaps serve on the select board. So we raised that to $1,000 or about $85 a month. The reason I want to bring this up is because it's so easy for misinformation to get out there. The select board padded themselves. They raised their pay. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was very uncomfortable for a couple members of the board who continued on the board to vote on that because you have to vote. That's your job on every single article and every single vote unless you have a conflict of interest. And actually kind of gave them a pass that it would be kind of a conflict, but they didn't take it. So my learning from this is please ask and look into questions for every single item. I don't care if you support it or you do not support it, but do the research. Don't take what you heard on the street corner, or don't take what you heard from some individual spouting off. It's very important. Do your own research, own your own research, and then vote accordingly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Is there anything else? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. Have a great night.